Everyone, I'm going to call to order the King County Council meeting for Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. My name is Claudia Balducci. I'm the council chair this year, and I'm going to start by asking our clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Here.
Councilmember Dunn. Councilmember Colwells.
Here.
Councilmember Lambert.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
Councilmember Up the Grove.
Here.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Here.
Councilmember Zahalai.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Usually the next item on our agenda is the flag salute and pledge of allegiance. We do not have a flag present in our virtual meeting to salute, but I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge some of the many things of import that have happened since our last meeting. We've had continued outcry in public for racial justice and equity. We've had some real tragedies in our community over this issue that I think threaten to take the focus off of the work that we need to do. And I want to just continue to encourage us all to focus on the work that is needed to build a more just community. And of course, we've had the 4th of July. We couldn't have big celebrations, but I understand there were lots of small celebrations, and that was, I think, a healthy thing as well. So with that, McDermott, would you put the minutes of June 23rd before us?
Madam Chair, I move we adopt the minutes from our June 23rd meeting.
The minutes are before us. Any comments, questions, or changes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Madam Clerk, are there any additions to the council agenda today?
I have three things, Madam Chair. The first is Ordinance 2020-0235 relating to public transportation, approving a transit service funding agreement with Pierce County and the City of Auburn for the continued operations of Route 497, and this is being added for first reading and referral to Mobility and Environment Committee. The second item is Labor Policy LP 2020-003 related to guidelines for negotiating and reopening labor contracts while county revenues are impacted by COVID-19. This is being added for first reading and referral to Labor Policy Committee. And the third item is Ordinance 2020-0242 approving and adopting the collective bargaining agreement negotiated by and between King County Amalgamated Transit Union Local 587, Metro Transit Department, representing employees in the Metro Transit Department, and establishing the effective date of the agreement. This is being added for first reading and referral to Metropolitan King County Council.
All right, thank you very much. I want to remind members that we don't actually have the usual so-called green folder email today. There was a technical problem with it. So each staff member who is presenting on an item that has amendments will send a separate email. There should be 4 of them coming throughout the meeting. So please keep an eye on your email for those documents as we go forward, and apologies for the late breaking technical challenges. All right, so that now we will have a public hearing, and I'm going to ask, we're going to go through some rigmarole here for the public people following along to get ourselves ready for the public hearing. The first one is, I'm going to call on Councilmember McDermott.
Madam Chair?
Yes, would you please?
I move we relieve the Mobility and Environment Committee in order to take action on item 12.
Thank you. That item is before us for relieving the committee. Any questions about that?
Could you just say what the item is for the record?
Item 12. Doesn't everybody know? What is? Sorry. What is? Madam Clerk, what is item 12?
Sorry to throw that out there.
No, it's a fair question. What is item 12, please?
Item 12 relates to floodplain development regulations, and that's 2020-0045.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any further comments or questions?
Question.
Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. According to mine, it says there's a striking amendment S2. So have we seen S2?
It will be part of the packet that I understand will be sent to us in our email.
So I kind of would like to wait until I see it before I vote on it.
Okay. So I'm going to call for a vote on whether to relieve Mobility and Environment Committee. If you would not prefer to relieve, then of course you can vote no.
I'm fine with relieving it. I just wanted to see S2. So, but we could relieve it right now.
All right, let me ask.
What's the motion before us?
Let me ask the clerk to please, if somebody would signal to the staff if that email is available and if that striking amendment has not been yet emailed and made available, could they do it now so that people have a little bit of time to look at it while we go through public comment?
I'll do it as fast as we can, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mom. All right, with that, I'm going to call, that was the most eventful procedural motion we've had in a long time. So thank you. Any further comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, before we hear from the public, I want to make sure that everyone who's called in understands how we're going to manage this process. It is different than our usual process when we are in the chamber together. As all members of the public join the meeting, they were automatically muted. We can see your name or the last 3 digits of your phone number. When it is your turn to speak, our clerk will call your name or number and unmute your line. Please make sure to also unmute your phone. If you've muted yourself on your phone, we won't be able to hear you even if you're unmuted on our Zoom call. We thank you for muting yourselves. It's very courteous, but please remember to unmute yourself when you're called on to speak. Before you begin your testimony, please wait to be acknowledged to be sure we can hear you, and then start by saying and spelling your name so we can capture it accurately for the record. I want to ask a question of Ms. Allende, if I could. I saw the list, there were 27 people signed up. Do you have a sense how many people are on the line who are not on the list?
I have about 10 or 15 numbers that I do not recognize and are not on my list.
Okay. I'm going to make a game call here that we will allow 90 seconds. So it's usually 2 minutes, but I'm going to reduce that to 90 seconds today, 1.5 minutes to speak, just so that we can get through everyone who has called to speak and hopefully be through public comment in about an hour or less to get on to our action items. So when you're called on, you will have 1.5 minutes to speak. We will keep time, and you will hear a timer go off when you have reached the end. At that point, when you hear the timer, feel free to finish your thought, which means the sentence that you're in, or maybe a little bit more, but please wrap up your comments quickly so that we can allow the next person to speak. Anyone who goes much past the timeline, I may interrupt you, and I hate to do that, but if in egregious cases, we may mute people. If you're listening on the TV or streaming, we ask that you turn that function off when you're speaking, otherwise we'll hear feedback on the line. And anyone who's disruptive to the meeting will be asked to hang up the call. Actually, I will ask staff to hang up the call so that anyone who's disruptive will leave the meeting. We have not had that problem to date, and I've been very appreciative of the people who have called and given testimony. Once you've finished your testimony, please hang up, and that makes it easier for us to manage the call. You can follow the remainder of our meeting on King County TV, Channel 22 on your cable, or you can stream it online. The link is on the council's website at www.kingcountycouncil.gov/council and click on the Watch Us Live button. At this point, Madam Clerk, would you please read the items into the record for the public hearing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 6 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0203, proposing an amendment to the King County Charter, removing restrictions related to the disposition of real property for less than full value when the property could be used for affordable housing, amending section 230.10.10 of the King County Charter and submitting the same to the voters of the county for their ratification or rejection at the next general election to be held in this county occurring more than 45 days after the enactment of this ordinance. Item 7 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0204, proposing to amend the King County Charter to replace the word citizen to either public, member of the public, or resident as applicable in the King County Charter, amending the preamble in sections 260 and 800 of the King County Charter, and submitting the same to the voters of the county for their ratification or rejection at the next general election to be held in this county, occurring more than 45 days after the enactment of this ordinance. Item 8 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0206, proposing to amend the King County Charter to grant the Office of Law Enforcement oversight, subpoena powers, amending Section 265 of the King County Charter and submitting the same to the voters of the county for their ratification or rejection at the next general election to be held in this county, occurring more than 45 days after the enactment of this ordinance. Item 9 is proposed ordinance number 2020-0209, approving and adopting the memorandum of agreement regarding the COVID-19 emergency COVID-19 testing agreement covering employees in the Seattle King County Department of Public Health and the Department of Community and Human Services and establishing the effective date of the agreement. Item 10 is proposed ordinance number 2020-0212, approving and adopting a memorandum of agreement regarding the COVID-19 emergency COVID care sites staffing agreement covering employees in the Seattle King County Department of Public Health and the Department of Community and Human Services and establishing the effective date of the agreement. Item 11 is proposed ordinance number 2019-0413 relating to comprehensive planning and development regulations. And item 12 is proposed ordinance number 2020-0045 related to floodplain development regulations.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to open the public hearing. And before we call on the first person, I just want to point out that as I look through the list of people who had signed up to speak, today is the first council meeting of the month, and so public comment is on those items on the agenda only for action, which are the ones that were just read into the record. I'll say just briefly again, they are some charter amendments, 2 memorandum of understandings regarding employees in public health and DCHS regarding items related to their work during COVID, the comprehensive plan and floodplain regulations update. If you have called on any other item, unfortunately, today is not the day for public comment on those. So I thank you for understanding. And at this point, I'm going to ask our clerk to please start calling the names on the list for public comment.
Madam Chair, I'm going to go just down the list, even though I see some of the people are not here.
Okay, please go ahead.
I'll give it a try. First person on the list to speak is Ernest King. Next person is Tim Trihimovich. Third person, Josh Castle.
Castle with Lehigh. Hi, this is Josh Castle with Lehigh. I just actually had a question regarding the topics we can discuss. The topic I want to discuss is on the broader COVID emergency. Is it okay to speak about that?
You're going to have to try to relate it to something on the agenda, if you could.
If it's related to shelter and tiny house villages, does that count?
Unfortunately, I don't think that is a topic for today, Josh. I'm really sorry to do that to you, but at our next meeting, you'd be welcome to comment on anything. The second meeting of the month is open general public comment.
Okay,
I'm
will
sorry
call
about
in
that.
then.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay,
have a good day.
You too.
Next person, Cheryl Jackson Williams. Next person, Him Young. Next person is Ken Konigsmark. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ken Konigsmark. I'm a rural resident living near Preston. I first wish to address the process used for the comp plan update and its effect on citizen engagement. Striker 2 was released just a few days before the public hearing. Striker 3 was released just before the 4th of July holiday and today's hearing. The SEPA review was released just yesterday, one day before the hearing. While I don't believe the council intent is to sneak in last-minute changes, I hope you realize that this process gives that appearance. Beyond the appearance, these last-minute changes make it very difficult for the public to keep current and engaged. And yes, while we're in a pandemic and things aren't normal, I urge you to adjust your process in the future to ensure more time for the public to review these changes before the hearings. In the update, there is a special study proposed for the rural lands between I-90 and Snoqualmie. I've participated in prior battles before the council to twice defeat attempts for urban upzoning on these lands. Let's not start another battle like that. A study may be useful, but only if the approach is based upon no free up zones, no free additions to the UGA, and only if a 4-to-1 like resolution is possible. I'm also very concerned about the loosening up of language regarding industrial uses in the rural area. The Stryker 2 amendment allows rural sites to be zoned industrial if they have, and I quote, long been used for comparable purposes with similar impacts, unquote. What does that mean? Who will determine that? And your SEPA analysis states that this potentially opens a rural area to 40 new industrial sites covering 275 acres with potential for significant adverse environmental impacts. Given that, I urge you to delete this amendment from the comp plan update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koenigsberg.
Next person on the list is Nicholas Bratton.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, this is Nicholas Bratton, B-R-A-T-T-O-N, representing Forterra. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the proposed comprehensive plan amendments. Forterra has been following the discussion over the past several months, and we're grateful not only for the Council's thoughtful approach to land use policy changes, but also for its openness to considering refinements to the amendments. Forterra's mission focuses on sustainability in all its dimensions, environmental, human, and economic. We support the county's efforts to improve sustainability by conserving its rural and working landscapes, and also by expanding the construction of affordable housing. We would like to continue to explore ways to achieve both of these goals in ways that are complementary and mutually reinforcing. Thank you for reconsidering changes to the 4-to-1 program and the transfer of development rights program. We look forward to continuing our partnership on strengthening conservation policy and incentivizing development of affordable housing. We have some ideas for both of these, and we'd like to share them in the next couple of weeks. King County has shown leadership in both of these areas, and I commend these efforts. Thank you for considering our input.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Sandy Gaither. Next person is Jen Boone.
This is Jen Boone, Jenboon. Can you hear me?
I can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on the comp plan. I have been a Redmond Ridge resident since 2002, and I'm president of the Redmond Ridge ROA, and I'm speaking officially in the role of representing and advocating for the residents and the board of directors. Redmond Ridge has officially participated with King County in the UPD expiry and zoning process, and we've been working with our council member, DEEPR, DLS. We've been going to town halls, county meetings, and we have received the consistent message that the executive scope and the new zoning proposal would replace the expiring UPD, but would extend the real conditions, the real look and feel of the current UPD and the SCC permit with the restrictions and with the permitted uses. We were repeatedly told that new zoning would be customized to match what is here already. Redmond Ridge does not support the zoning as it is proposed. The new uses proposed are not congruent, and the amendments proposed by Kathy Lambert are a start to King County keeping their word and acting in good faith to meet their obligations to carry forward the intentions of the UPD and the SCC agreements. The current zoning proposal betrays the residents who have spoken to King County repeatedly and clearly. Please amend to match the UPD and the FCC agreements and to meet the obligation to give the unincorporated resident a seat at the table and a voice that is heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Aditya Rao. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Aditya Rao, and I'm 5 years old. Next Sunday, I'll be 6 years old. I'm here on the behalf of my brother Aditya Rao. I'm here to talk about why companies cannot move here to our community. I am 5 years old and starting first grade in September. I'm here to talk about that. My brothers and I walk to school every day and we bike to the parks in the community. If companies move here, which might create pollution and smoke and be dangerous for kids to go out on alone, we will not be able to walk or bike safely to school anymore. If helicopter pads are allowed, it will make more noise and the whole community will not be peaceful. Please let us continue like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Sandy Cobb. Next person, Ken Lanz. Next person, Serena Glover.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Serena Glover, Glover, Executive Director, Friends of Snoqualmie Valley. I'm going to be speaking on the updates to the comp plan. In Foz et al. Versus King County, the Growth Management Hearing Board order rejected as non-compliant code amendments adopted in the Adult Beverage Ordinance due to gross deficiencies under SEPA and GMA. The order also took the additional step of invalidating the amendments due to their pronounced violations and set a schedule for county compliance. Whether the steps barely begun by the county will ultimately prove sufficient to establish compliance with SEPA and GMA remains to be seen. However, as of now, there's no lawful basis under SEPA or GMA for the county to adopt or readopt those provisions of the Adult Beverage Ordinance into its comp plan or code. Yet that is effectively what the proposed update before you now appears to do. These proposed provisions should be stricken and the proposed readoption dropped until this challenge is sorted out. In addition, in your APD mitigation section, which we've seen several iterations of, only one just today, there should not be any mitigation scheme that allows for the swap of land in one APD for land in another. This will only encourage speculative development of ABT lands in areas close to urban centers in exchange for farmlands in far-flung parts of the county. This is not in the interest of local food resilience for our citizens, nor for efforts to mitigate climate change. And finally, I agree with the comments made by the gentleman earlier, I believe Ken, who commented on process. Fully agree with that. And I would also encourage you, if you have not yet, to read the 3 submittals already provided by the rural area organizations. There were 7 of us, I believe. We've already submitted comments, comprehensive comments on the comp plan, and we will have another update coming on July 13 that covers S3 and the updated SEPA addendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Julianne Bogarty. Next person on the list is Dawn Hewling. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Don Hewling, Huling, 17117 Southeast 329th Street, Auburn. This proposed comp plan amendment S3 with regards to the PAC rack totally disregards King County's stated goal to keep rural areas rural. Allowing a zoning change for PAC rack will tell others that KC is okay with allowing commercialization and industrialization of the rural area because of the example given. That's Pacific Raceways. They will be stating that unless you give them the same treatment as you gave PACRAC, you will be treating them differently, which is also against your stated goals and code. The PACRAC property zoning proposed for unrestricted industrial zoning designation includes and is adjacent to Suzette Creek, its steep slopes and their buffers. This area has populations of wildlife, including endangered coho salmon. Much of this area was proposed to be designated as a conservation easement, which is being ignored by PACRAC and this amendment. In additional consideration, Suzette Creek is a major source of water for Suzette Creek salmon hatchery, just a short distance downstream. This property is also designated as a critical aquifer recharge zone. As a reminder, Pacific Raceways SIR conditional use permit modified conditions A-71-0-71 30 April page 4 paragraph 16 states a bunch of stuff about not making any changes to the conditional use permit without an amendment. I want you to know that I agree with all the testimony that Peter Rimbos and Greg Wingard will be presenting. Please vote against the S3 amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Prakash Narayanan. Sorry about that. You are unmuted, and please go ahead.
Hi, folks. My name is Prakash Narayanan. Hope you can hear me.
I can.
Awesome. So I am a resident on Redmond Ridge since 2009. Close to Rosa Parks. I have a beautiful family with a toddler and a 10-year-old. So the county's comprehensive plan, midpoint update scope and land use study explicitly recognize the need to protect the established pattern of land use and development on Redmond Ridge. What may make sense for other parts of the county does not adequately reflect the intended design for Redmond Ridge. When originally approved, the Redmond Ridge UP Development Agreement rejected the application of county zoning, generally adopted a specific tailored list of approved land uses. That more limited list of approved uses must be protected under the ordinance. The proposed land use changes for Redmond Ridge are important to the community, concerned about the limited opportunity for public review and comment and limited ability and opportunity to discuss these important issues with staff and elected officials. Virtual public meetings and hearings limit our public opportunity to observe what's happening and restrict the opportunity to comment. So with that being said, we all understand the COVID impact, and so we are appreciative of the changes that Council Member Lambert has actually tried to do here. So we're urging the Council to take additional time to make sure the inconsistencies between the Redmond Ridge UPD approvals and the proposed zoning are fully addressed before adopting this ordinance. Thank you for your opportunity.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Greg Wingard.
Yes, this is Greg Wingard. Can you hear me?
I can.
My name is Greg Wingard. I live in the Covington area. For identification purposes, I am president of Green River Coalition and co-founder of that organization. We have already submitted comments and will be submitting additional updated comments, but I just want to indicate that the coalition is opposed to both the map amendment to strike the 2012 comprehensive plan. Map amendment that puts a conservation easement on the Pacific Raceway property, and we're also opposed to the two of the options in the 2020 zoning amendment, which would either flip the zoning to outright to industrial zoning, which we are against, or flip the zoning by changing conditions within the IP Suffolk zoning. My comments today are as an individual rather than on behalf of the organization. I think that the amendments, I would echo Ken's comments that the process here has not allowed for substantive review. both the Pacific Raceway amendments for 2012 changes and for the 2020 amendment contained significant errors and omissions, which gave an erroneous factual picture to the public, making review and comment very difficult, particularly in the middle of a epidemic. Basically, I'd like to also say that we are in agreement with the SEPA amended comments or decision that was brought forward by the SEPA official, Ivan Miller, and has addressed the PACRAC amendments.
Mr. Winger,
and I think that probably ends my time.
Thank you.
Next person on the list is Nishka Ramananth.
Hello.
Hi.
I am Nishka Ramanath, a resident of the Redmond Ridge community and a rising high school sophomore. My family has lived here for most of my life, and this is my home. Growing up, I remember how much my family enjoyed the quality of life, the diversity in people, and nature. In the past few years, I've noticed my parents being repeatedly worried about the lack of representation and limited governance for this community. I remember protesting against repeated attempts at forced introduction of marijuana into the industry. At issue is the quality of life that the King County has promised us. This community is densely populated and has 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school. There are a lot of young families with children that make this their home. It is unwise and unjust for King County to introduce policies that may use to bring in industries and businesses that don't conform to the community fabric and introduce noise, air, water pollution, and crime. Speaking for my peers here, we fear that the impact that this will have on kids. I've already seen the destruction of forests and trails within the past few years. I can only imagine what the proposed uses can do. We live in an enlightened world of social justice and equality. I urge you to be courageous and fight for bringing up the quality of life for everyone in King County rather than bringing down the quality for everyone in the name of social justice. Please continue to work with my community leaders and preserve the original intent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Rohini Vemula. Next name is Neha Ramananth. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I am Neha Ramanath, Ramanath. My family has been residents of the Redmond Ridge community, and I grew up in this neighborhood attending local schools. I'm a cross-country runner and use the local forest trail systems extensively. In my young life, I've already seen the thinning of forests as woods gave way to concrete featureless buildings. As a student of the environmental sciences, I understand there's a need to balance growth and consumption with sustainability. There are serious consequences when we upset the balance beyond a limit. With the proposed updates to the neighborhood planning documents, they have introduced legislation and policies that can justify the introduction of harmful industries to this area, including marijuana production, metal industries, concrete plants, fossil fuels, and wastewater treatment. I am very concerned for the safety of people who live here, especially younger people, because it will affect how they grow up. I believe this community is among the model communities to emulate for the rest of the King County system, rather than slowly and surely degenerate the community. There needs to be social justice in this community and every community to ensure history doesn't repeat itself. Please do not exclude my community members' opinions and collaborate with them in a driving plan that will be beneficial for the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sandy Cobb was here. She just wasn't unmuted. So if you could give her a chance to speak, that would be appreciated.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in for a second here. Just for anyone's listening, if we called on you and you weren't able to unmute, we will circle back through again at the end just to make sure people aren't waiting out there. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Next person on the list is David Matson. Please unmute yourself. Next person on the list is Jeremy Williams.
Hi, thank you to the council for hearing me today. My name is Jeremy Williams. I come to you as one voice of many speaking on behalf of unincorporated Skyway. I'll try to stay within my allotted time as everyone's time is important, and that includes especially the time of nearly 20,000 Skyway residents who have poured decades into providing King County with every possible combination of words to make one point: invest in Skyway.
Mr. Williams, I'm terribly sorry, but this item is not on our agenda today.
This is in reference to the comp plan. Is S2 not in reference to that?
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that coming.
Sorry about that.
Give him a little extra time because I interrupted. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. In preparation for my remarks to you today, I tried tracking down in this council's online legislative records the moment the Skyway West Hill action plan was punted by this council, yet again deferring any action in Skyway. It was on December 5th, 2016, as Councilmember Dembowski moved adoption of Ordinance 2016-0155, Amendment 1 for the comprehensive plan, which, quote, removes the Skyway West Hill action plan for additional work and requires in the underlying document that be completed in 2017 on the schedule for the community plans. Now, how difficult it was for me to track down that tiny bit of info speaks not just to the inaccessibility of government to the people it represents, but even more so to how little Skyway has historically been at the forefront of this council's work. We're barely a footnote. The unincorporated areas of King County are where this council can have the most impact as a governing body. This council is in possession of a letter stating the requests and demands of the Skyway Coalition and hundreds of Skyway community members. Today, I ask you, ahead of your July 21st vote, to join in supporting the leadership of Councilmember Zahalai to showcase what is possible for unincorporated areas by modeling Skyway, by model of Skyway when our government champions community-driven development. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you sure you had enough time? I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
Next person on the list is Vikas Taneja. I have unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you listen? Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Hi, myself, Vikas Taneja, and I am a Redmond Ridge resident. First of all, thank you for allowing public comments on proposed comprehensive plan. I support amendments disallowing marijuana and adult entertainment business. I also ask and request for more and further amendments to carry on existing development restrictions into new zoning. I purchased my home relying on the current development conditions, which provide protection that allow marijuana and adult entertainment business. While I understand that UPD had an expiration date, it was clear to me that the guidelines upon expiration were to keep the same protections in place. Changing the conditions feels like a violation of the use restrictions I agree with and relied on when purchasing my home. I hope council members will consider further amendments to bring the new zoning at par with the existing one. I also hope that the council will fulfill their commitment to the Redmond Ridge unincorporated residents that zoning would reflect the UPD conditions and real look and feel of the community as it is now, and not add or replace with the new uses that are unacceptable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Blair Engelbrecht. I have unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thank you. So my name is Blair Engelbrecht. I'm the Boating Programs Manager for Puget Sound Keeper Alliance, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of Puget Sound Keeper. We would like to express our support for Councilmember Upthegrove's amendments to the proposed fossil fuel and fossil fuel facility regulations. This kind of bold action to fight climate change and protect our communities from fossil fuel threats is the kind of leadership we need now more than ever in Washington State. We were supportive when King County followed the leadership of Tacoma and Whatcom counties in 2019 and adopted a fossil fuel infrastructure moratorium. King County now has an opportunity to create an example for other counties in Washington and lead all of us into a greener future by passing these amendments. Do I have much time left? Sorry, I didn't want to go
You've got about 45 seconds.
Great. Puget Soundkeeper is especially supportive of the county exploring fossil fuel risk bonding as a proposed work plan item. It is imperative that the county recognize the financial risks assumed by the public whenever fossil fuel infrastructure is built and hold project proponents accountable for costs, whether in an emergency or the eventual decommissioning and cleanup of these toxic facilities as we transition into a clean energy economy. COVID-19 has put us into a financial crisis. We commend this work plan item for taking the monetary onus of fossil fuel risks off of the shoulders of the public and placing it where it belongs, squarely on the shoulders of the fossil fuel industry. Thank you all for your work to keep the comprehensive plan update process moving forward and publicly accessible, especially in these challenging times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person on the list is Ambarish Chitney.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, my name is Ambarish Chitnis, and I've been a resident of Redmond Ridge for the last 14 years. My daughter was born in Redmond Ridge, and she's attended her entire schooling has been here, and we value the environment, the kid-friendly environment specifically of this community. We specifically talking about marijuana processing. Marijuana processing and production are not included in the UPDU tables, and I believe that they should not be permitted by Ordinance 2019-0413. Also, the access to adult entertainment is something I'm specifically not comfortable with given that I have young children growing up here. So the adult entertainment uses were also not permitted in the UPDU tables and should not be permitted by Ordinance 2019-0413. I'm also not comfortable with the community residential facilities that were also not permitted in the UPDU tables. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Pramod Jayasalmeria. Please unmute yourself. Madam Chair, I'll start on the numbers now that are on the list.
Very good. Thank you.
Last three digits, 151. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello?
Hi, would you like to give public testimony?
Yes, I would. Good afternoon. My name is Ken Lands. That's L-A-N-S. I'm a doctor and the past president of Washington's Visions for Social Responsibility, a nonprofit with a 40-year history of health-based advocacy in our state. WPSR strongly supports Councilmember Updegrove's amendments to the proposed fossil fuel and fossil fuel facility regulations due to their clear public health benefits. It is vitally important to have bold action like this to fight pollution and climate change and to protect our communities from fossil fuel threats. As a physician, I consider the directive to consider and mitigate the full scope of environmental impacts, including life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, threats to air and water quality, and public health risks to be particularly important. The longer we wait to act on pollution and climate change, the more dire and widespread the impacts on people will be. We should be doing everything we can to reduce our fossil fuel use rather than enabling it. So please protect the health and safety of this county's citizens by passing these Updegrove amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person I'm going to call on that we missed earlier was Sandy Cobb. You are unmuted. Please go ahead. Last three digits.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. My apologies. My name is Sandy Cobb, and I'm the on-site director for Redmond Bridge. I'm calling in regards to the comp plan update. Thank you for your time and thought you've put into the striking amendments and into the comprehensive plan update process as a whole. Without changes, the currently proposed comp plan is inconsistent with prior approvals that govern Redmond Bridge, as well as the King County Comprehensive Plan policies and the Bear Creek Community Plan policies that guide UPD development. When originally approved, the Redmond Bridge UPD Development Agreement rejected application of county zoning generally and instead adopted a specific tailored list of approved land uses. That more limited list of approved uses must be protected in Ordinance 2019-0413. Marijuana processing and production are not included in the UPD use tables and should not be permitted by Ordinance 2019-0413. Kathy Lambert's Amendment Number 9 prohibiting such uses on Redmond Ridge should be adopted. Adult entertainment uses are not permitted in the UPD tables, and Kathy Lambert's Amendment Number 8 prohibiting such uses on Redmond Ridge should be adopted. Community residential facilities are not permitted in the UPD use tables. Only senior housing was permitted, and they should not be permitted. We urge that the adoption of another amendment similar to Kathy Lambert's Amendments Number 8 and 9 that add a P suffix condition to prohibit these uses in Redmond Ridge. Also, the local schools could not handle additional housing that are in the proposed zoning in the business park. In addition, industrial zoning is not appropriate for the Redmond Ridge Business Park. While the park does include manufacturing uses, county policies direct industrial development to areas that may have direct access from arterials or freeways and that avoid access to residential areas, referencing King County Comprehensive Plan Policy U-173. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next number on the list is last three digits 340. You are unmuted. Please go ahead if you'd like to give public testimony.
Great. This is Stephanie Hillman with the Sierra Club, and we will be submitting some written comments, but I just wanted to take the opportunity today to weigh in and in appreciation of King County moving forward with ordinance and efforts that will protect our communities from the build-out of dirty fossil fuel projects, and really protect our communities in that way. We've been facing too many of these threatening proposals for years now and playing a game of whack-a-mole to some degree, and so we're incredibly appreciative of these efforts to, like I said, protect our communities and really kind of solidify health and safety here. So, again, we want to appreciate that and support Council Member Upthegrove's amendments and the comprehensive plan updates. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next number on the list is 697. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
My name is Mark Johnston. That's Johnston, and I'm from Skyway. And once again, it's a great day to be in Skyway. I'd like to speak about the comprehensive plan update, and in particular, the Skyway West Hill Community Plan. Actually, first I have a question, and that is about how amendments, the striking amendment in particular, is updated without being voted on, and yet its proposed amendments are still amendments rather than being incorporated as a change. And if you could advise me on whether that's something that could be addressed either before or after I make further comments, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, Mr. Johnston. Typically, we don't engage in back and forth and answer questions, but we have taken down your question, and if you don't get an answer at the end of today's meeting, please send me or your representative an email, and we will make sure we answer.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yeah, before the meeting today, I wasn't aware that the amendment, striking amendment, had been amended itself. In particular, and you've heard other comments from residents of King County that are concerned about marijuana regulations in King County and their effect on their communities or potential future effect. Also, I see on today's agenda that there's a motion to consider racism a public health crisis in King County. And what I can tell you is, from my perspective as a resident of Skyway, is that marijuana regulations at the county level for Skyway have been not only racist, but not appropriate for full and best community health. And the executive's proposal for the limit on the number of marijuana stores in Skyway is highly inappropriate in that same regard. So I urge the council to approve what is now Amendment 11 to Striker S3 as proposed by Council Members Lahalai for those reasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next number on the list, last three digits, 786. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Sorry, just a second. My name is Kevin Keith, Keith. I'm speaking on the comp plan. I've lived in Redmond Ridge since May of 2016. My wife has also opened up her own clinic here in the same month of 2016 after a lengthy 2+ year process of searching and identifying a location, planning, and finally building out. Our kids attend school here. We have worked hard, coming from very humble origins to be where we are. Our business helps to support our staff and their families, not to dismiss how much our staff support us and define our business in who they are themselves. The UPD and this community have been developed well over 20+ years. It has grown to include high home values, wonderful schools, vibrant and diverse businesses, of which include well over 30 minority or women-owned small businesses. Note that is roughly over twice the amount of the majority or white male-owned small businesses here. The population itself includes such saturation of minorities, it is near impossible to identify a single population that is the majority. It is a healthy, strong, and growing well. Its development was unique and forward-thinking in many ways, as it is most of its infrastructure in place, minus the failure to increase the road capacity as promised, which is quickly being overwhelmed. Unfortunately, the glaring oversight was leaving a large and dense population grossly underrepresented. It is a very difficult task for the King County representative, at best. For the community to establish a governing body, it's beyond the reasonable current means and abilities, and is a very hard-working community. Thank you for the council for taking the time to listen and consider our voices, as we have left with very little other options. There's no reason to amend the zoning policies. As the UPD expires to update the standards and policies and laws, etc., it doesn't need to be effective of the zoning.
Thank you.
No, I understand. I appreciate the time. I apologize. I've built in way too much that I want to say. I wish I had more time. In the end, I do wish that you guys consider that there's no need to amend the zoning. It was promised. It's what everybody has invested and built into businesses and communities and the surrounding communities. To change it now would create more instability.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. But we are always accept written comment. Please feel free to write to us at any time. And we do have open public comment again in 2 weeks at this time. Please go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Next number on the list is 236. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Can you turn that down?
Hand on.
We can hear you.
Next number on the list is 786. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, Cover. supposedly.
Yeah.
Till October.
Yeah, it's been paid from July to September to October, so I last the whole year, I think.
Yeah, I know. There's all the things going on nowadays. Right.
This is something that never happened in the chambers where people would just start.
Surviving staying home with these guys?
Yeah.
Come on, Madam.
Which one of them is more of a headache? Or does it depend on the time?
The big one.
No.
I've muted the phone. Please go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Next number on the list is 938. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, my name is Monica Priebe. Last name is spelled Priebe. I come to you today as part of the Enumclaw Plateau Community Association, and I'd like to comment on the comprehensive plan update, specifically regarding the update to zoning in RA5. I wanted to point out that neither Striker 2 nor Striker 3 correct the zoning issue. Wanted to specifically talk about moving industrial and mineral uses into the rural and forest land interface that directly counteracts stated county goals surrounding forest initiatives within the county. And while I'm not speaking to you from this part today, as a member of the Rural Forest Commission, I do have questions about process, as during COVID, we've not been allowed to meet and are unable to address this. And so I do see that this moving forward on this zoning effort to allow industrial mineral uses into these RA5 areas erodes that rural resident trust in King County further. And I'm saying that as a rural King County citizen. Also, there's vague language around the organics composting facilities. It's not defined in code, but in motion 15329, it is defined as grinding, pulverizing organic waste and construction demolition materials. This is going to increase noise, air, traffic, and water pollution in some of the last remaining wildlife and salmon habitat water recharge areas between the Cascades and Puget Sound within King County's boundaries. The code study assumed that material processing facility definition would apply to new organic composting facilities. We understand that the study itself found that no new King County code was necessary and thus recommended no action be taken by the council. However, we do not agree with the executive's basic premise to assume materials processing facility definition would apply to new organic composting facilities, and thus believe the code study was flawed. Further, we believe the existing King County Code 21A 06742
I'm sorry, can you wrap
that
up?
allows industrial scale operations such as materials processing facilities in the rural area is flawed. We call for council to revisit this code section and thus begin to rectify an inconsistency with basic rural area policies elsewhere in the comp plan. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I ask if you would please email that your written comments, because I just personally, the level of detail was such that I wasn't sure which section it was referring to, and it would be helpful to me to see that if you could send them.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next number on the list is 048. You are unmuted. Next number on the list is 079. You are unmuted.
Good afternoon, Council. Can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you. My name is Alex Ramel. That's R-A-M-E-L. I'm a climate policy advisor with Stand.Earth up here in Bellingham, and I'm speaking in favor today of Councilmember Upthegrubb's proposed amendments regarding fossil fuel facilities. As I think you may know, Whatcom County has had a moratorium on unrefined fossil fuel expansion projects similar to King County's, and ours has been in place since about 2016. Our council adopted related comp plan updates in 2017, and our Planning Commission is now evaluating bold measures that will prevent new refineries, new fossil fuel transshipment facilities, and it will require conditional use permits for expansion of the existing fossil fuel facilities, and it'll spell out strong local requirements for implementing SEPA at those facilities. We anticipate these policies will be finalized by the Planning Commission this August and taken up by Whatcom County Council in the fall. And I just want to share two quick things with you about our experience. We've been told that the moratorium would be a jobs killer, and the truth is far from. The last few months to decide, when, like everybody else, we've been hit with COVID, and we've also had an unrelated aluminum smelter closure. But those things to the side, since 2016, our community has added hundreds of manufacturing jobs and construction jobs here in Whatcom County every year since 2016. Our council members were also told that if they took this kind of bold action, that they'd all be voted out of office. And those threats have been empty. Every member of our council who supported these policies and run for re-election has succeeded every election since 2016. They succeeded because the community strongly supports measures that protect public health and safety and protect our climate. So while we wait for the state and national governments to take climate action, I'm really excited to see leadership like this emerging at the local government level. And I hope Whatcom County's experience and partnership will encourage you to take bold climate action and adopt these amendments. Thanks for your time and for your leadership.
Thank you. Next number is last three digits, 310. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, hello. Sorry. Thank you. It took me a while to get off mute. I think I had myself on mute as well. My name is Jill Hi. My name is Jill Tracy, and I'm speaking about the Redmond Ridge content. And I wanted to share my testimony. I've been a resident of the Redmond Ridge community for the past 20 years. My three children were born here. They're now ages 8, 11, and 13. When they were little, they attended preschool at Goddard School in Redmond Ridge, and they currently attend Rosa Parks Elementary School and Timberline Middle School. And my children are all, feeling safe, happy, and healthy, and connected in the Redmond Ridge community. A while back, a few years ago, the same issue had come up, and my children actually testified at the King County Council meeting about their concerns about the changes that were proposed. They wanted to testify again this time around, but since we're virtual, they actually sent in some letters over email that I forwarded to the King County Council, so hopefully you see that. But basically, the amazing thing we think about the Redmond Ridge community is that, there's a lot of diversity, racial, cultural, ethnic, religious, age, and more, and we live in harmony with common goals of creating a better life for our children, community, and humanity. We care about our city, our county, our state, and our nation. We believe in being neighborly. And together, we really feel as a community that we want to prevent adult entertainment, marijuana processing, manufacturing, marijuana retail outlets from opening in Redmond Ridge East, and the Trilogy communities. These establishments, while legal, do not belong in a community with young children in the vicinity of schools, daycares, and children's parks. And we would like you to prevent this from happening in our neighborhood. And the other thing that we heard in recent announcements was the desire to build on the green spaces, and that's another huge concern that we have around continuing to expand the development within Redmond Ridge. We want to preserve the health of the community as well as the natural beauty that's here. So just want to get our voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next number, last three digits, 376. You are unmuted. Next number, last three digits, 368. You are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, my name is Laura Manti, and I've lived in Redmond Ridge for 19 years, and I'm calling regarding the comp plan.
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
Sure, it's Mantei.
Thank you.
Hi, I agree with Sandy Cobb, Jen Boone, and previous residents of Redmond Ridge. I think that something as important as creating new zoning should be postponed until residents have sufficient time to review the amendments and be able to fully participate. The FCC agreement requires over and above normal involvement of our community, but with the COVID circumstances, it seems to be violating that. In addition, the continual assurances of numerous county officials regarding the zoning that it would be written to match seems misleading. The zoning proposal is not congruent with the executive scope nor the promises made to the Redmond Ridge ROA and residents. I'd also like to request a council of the whole meeting in Redmond Ridge, and I think a great location would be at Rosa Parks. The council could be under the covered basketball area. If the weather's bad, the residents could socially distance on the big playground so that people could all be heard, be in person, and be able to express what's going on for them, what it's like out here to live, and how it will affect the community. I also want to let you guys know that I think there's a technical issue with regards to people not being able to have their voice heard right now. There's a delay from listening to the online streaming versus what we're hearing on the telephones. So it's maybe even a 20-second delay. So perhaps by the time someone hears their number called on the computer, you've already done it on the phone. I think that might be part of it. And I know specifically Julianne Bogarty is online and hoping you'll call her name again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Next number, last three digits, 514. You are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, my name is Victor. I am a resident of Redmond Ridge, Victor Weiss, and I'm here to talk about the comprehensive plan. And it was great to see the amendments to reduce the marijuana usage as well as the adult businesses usage. But I also want to testify that the current proposal still has significant differences from the original UPD plan. And I'm asking council to reject the current proposal and continue working with homeowner association boards, 3 of them, Redmond Ridge, Redmond Ridge East, and Trilogy, until we have a proposal that is supported by these boards and is supported by the residents, because there's a risk that the current proposal can actually destroy our community, as we heard from many testimonies today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next number on the list is 530. You are unmuted.
Hi, my name is David Matson, M-A-T-S-O-N. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Yes, I am a resident of Redmond Ridge, and I've lived here for over 10 years now. My wife and I purchased a home here as the first home we purchased when we moved into the area. When our family grew, we temporarily rented in Redmond Ridge after we sold, and then bought another house in Redmond Ridge. So we've lived at 3 addresses in Redmond Ridge for over 10 years now. We really enjoy living here. The unique character of the community is a big part of why we enjoy Redmond Ridge. The proposed changes to the zoning in Redmond Ridge would make significant differences in the community. We're here today because King County's actions in establishing a UPD that created a unique community in King County. From what we've heard in previous statements from King County officials, the desire seems to be to treat Redmond Ridge like any other area in unincorporated King County. But that is not the community that King County created. It created a unique community under the UPD, and the residents of Redmond Ridge are asking that you preserve the character of the community rather than changing it over our objections, specifically not allowing adult entertainment or marijuana, community residential facilities, waste transfer facilities, other things like that, but preserving the unique character of the community that was created here in Redmond Ridge. Also, I would urge the council to consider not just the letter, but the spirit of the open public meetings laws, that we be able to have our voice heard in person and not just remotely. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next number is last 3 digits, 557. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Wonderful. My name is Aaron Smith, and I'm calling related to the comprehensive plan, and specifically map amendment number 9, related to the zoning of Pacific Raceways as industrial. This provision was added as part of the S2 amendments and SEPA addendum from yesterday, and certainly appears to hit on the questionable public participation process comments addressed by some of the previous commenters here. Specifically, this change would more than double the rural industrial acreage in King County without any new environmental review. This is the equivalent to more than 3 times that of the Preston industrial area. And I specifically want to bring your attention to the SEPA addendum, which makes it clear that this would have a significant environmental impact, which has not been considered as part of any previous SEPA determinations. As the basis of those determinations always considered that the racetrack use, but the land use designation would return back to RA5. And over the last 40 years, the county has determined multiple times that this particular property and the racetrack use itself needs an EIS, and yet one still hasn't been done. It should be clear that this council should strike map amendment number 9 from any further discussion in the comp plan amendment and take the time to fully consider this type of change with the special review, with the special emphasis on environmental review and with proper public participation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next number on the list, last 3 digits, 694. You are unmuted. Last 3 digits, 165. You are unmuted.
Hello? Can you
Hi.
hear me?
I can.
My name is Layla Corey, and I've lived here all my life, and I'm 11 years old, and I live in Redmond Ridge, and I go to Rosa Park, and I would not like marijuana in this area, and I want you to protect Redmond Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last number I have, Madam Chair, is last 3 digits, 607. Last 3 digits, 607. You're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. My name is Pramod. Last name is Jaisalmeria, Jaisalmeria. I'm a resident of Redmond Ridge. I've been living in this area for almost 8 years. I have 2 lovely kids and a wife and a family. We all enjoy this neighborhood very much because of the couple of reasons. Because we find all the neighborhood is very calm, composed, and the natural beauty is around is very nice. We enjoy meeting a lot of good the neighborhood people, and my kids enjoy the schools, the lovely schools, teachers, everybody. The part by opening a marijuana and adult entertainment center. The way we are basically living together here. Also, I have a couple of more concerns around the way we are trying to push this amendment during the COVID situation, where we all are bogged down with seeing like how we can provide the educations for my kids in next fall, how I'm going to have my job to continue. We have to focus now more on, hey, how I can protect my house in this community when the economic turmoil is just around the corner when every day we hear. So our focus actually should have been more on to have stabilizing the community and people's life. We are trying to disturb that without actually supporting each other. So that's the biggest concern. And in the COVID situation, we cannot meet in person. We cannot raise our concerns. My kids wanted to testify, but there's no opportunity to testify. They can send emails, but in-person testifying is also not available. So I'm basically in a great concern where we are trying to push these amendments forward. Thank you so much for your time and effort and hearing me out today. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's the last of the list that I have.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you a question. How many names do you have, do you think, either from the list or otherwise, of folks who did not respond when you called on them?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably over 10.
I think it would probably be best if you ran through them one more time, so that if we just unmute everybody now and there's a number of people waiting, it will be hard to manage through that. So maybe you could just ask those names one more time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll start back at the top. Ernest King. Tim Trahimovich. Cheryl Jackson Williams.
I'm sorry, I see Tim on the phone. Did you unmute him?
Let's see.
I unmuted him. Go ahead. Mr. Trahimovich, you there?
I am. Thank you very much for unmuting me. I appreciate it very much. My last name is spelled Trohimovich. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I'm the Director of Planning and Law for FutureWise. We would urge the Council not to include the Snoqualmie UGA study in the comp plan update that's been reviewed previously and rejected for good reasons. We also recommend that the Pacific Raceway properties rezoned and amendments not be adopted. We would also recommend that you not adopt the amendments expanding industrial uses outside of existing industrial locations. We also recommend that the policies for the 4-to-1 program not be weakened. We have some specific comments that we've included in the letter. And finally, we would like to support the Up the Grow fossil fuel amendment. They will increase the leadership that you've shown on climate. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk this afternoon.
Thank you. I've gone over the list, Madam Chair, and I'm not seeing some of the names, so I'm just moving down a little bit.
Sure, please keep going.
Did Sandy Cobb get a chance to speak?
I believe she did.
Okay. Ken Lawns. Rohini Vermula. We had David Matson. And last three digits, 236. You're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
To comprehensive plan. And my name is Tim O'Brien, O'Brien, president of Enumclaw Plateau Community Association. EPCA is the CSA for unincorporated area residents in the Enumclaw Plateau area of South King County, which is one of the larger agricultural areas of the county that's left. Myself and several of my colleagues do not support the proposal of this S2 policy wording of the R-656A in regards to agricultural production districts. We do not support this proposal that allows the acquisition of 3 acres added to 1 acre lost when 1-to-1 is not possible within the same APD. We ask, why would anyone utilize the 3-to-1 in the same APD when all they need to do is 1-to-1? So it's not clear what the wording as stated means. Does this 3-to-1 mean replacement land may be acquired in another APD on a 1-to-1 plus the 2-to-1 for acquisition / restoration? That's a question mark. And we do not support any proposal that allows for a net loss of acreage in any individual agricultural production district. We feel that for agricultural production districts to work effectively, local producers need to maintain a critical mass of agricultural infrastructure, and thus changing the use from or reducing agricultural land, particularly in South King County, will make it difficult to maintain the agricultural production there, to maintain farms. If I may make one additional comment, we feel that there's not been enough time or an opportunity for the public to comment on the comp plan review process, and additionally restricting industrial uses to existing industrial zoning. Those are the comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next person on the list is Sai Samaneni.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, my name is Sai Samaneni. I currently live in Federal Way. I wanted to speak first briefly to the Skyway West Hill Community Sub-Area Plan. I underscore what Mr. Jeremy Miller and other speakers from Skyway have said. This planning process is not inclusive, and the South Sound faces a lot of digital equity access barriers that make it so that this format does not work. So I think we really need to take those equity considerations into our concern as we do this planning process. The second thing that I wanted to speak to is the comprehensive plan, and really urging council to take into consideration the impacts of COVID, both on our county and state revenue, but also the realisticness of this plan's amendments and our ability to invest in them. Especially within the Skyway sub area, we have a responsibility to the non-white and low-income families that are definitively going to be gentrified from the city of Seattle based on what school district enrollment trends show. So we have a double responsibility, not only to remedy existing disparities, but to give these families that have become socioeconomic refugees from the city of Seattle a better opportunity in our South Sound neighborhood. And as an unincorporated zone, King County Council has sole discretion on what the quality of life outcomes and access to equity to those families looks like.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Roxana Teodorescu. And you are unmuted. If you would like to give public testimony, please unmute yourself. Next number on the list is last three digits, 195. You are unmuted. If you'd like to give public testimony, please go ahead. Last three digits, 368. You are unmuted. Last three digits, 468. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
My name is Giovanna Corey. I'm 13 years old. I go to Timberline Middle School in Redmond Ridge. Please help preventing adult entertainment, marijuana processing, manufacturing, and marijuana retail outlets from opening in Redmond Ridge communities. These establishments, though legal, do not belong in a community with young children and in the vicinity of schools, daycares, and children's parks. Please prevent this from happening in our neighborhood and set a precedent to eliminate these establishments from other neighborhoods. Current and future daycares child and family-centered life. Also, continue to protect the forest and health spaces. In the last community meeting, I learned that there is a threat of reducing the green spaces for more building of homes. Animals, birds, and insects, which not only give the area its unique natural beauty and help to keep this area clean, quiet, and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Last number I have is last three digits 694. You are unmuted. Madam Chair, that's all I have so far.
Okay. So thank you for that. And we're going to do one more thing here, which we do at the end of our meetings just to make sure. We know that it can be challenging sometimes to catch right on. So before we close the public hearing, I'm going to ask our clerk to please unmute all of the phone lines. And then I'm going to ask if there's anyone remaining on the line who wishes to provide public testimony. And if anybody hears that and wants to, and they haven't already spoken, please speak out and we'll figure out how to line you up. So, yeah. Madam Clerk, hold on one second, please. Are all the lines unmuted now?
They are, Madam Chair.
I think I heard Sandy.
Yeah, Sandy Gaither.
Can you hold on one second? Anybody else?
Julianne Bogarty. I wasn't called the second time.
Gotcha. Anybody else?
Roxana Theodorescu, also missed, I believe.
Okay, can you say your name a little more slowly for me? I apologize.
Roxana Theodorescu, if she's still online.
Theodorescu, we'll try again. Anybody else? Okay, I'm just going to take it over. I took down the names. If you don't mind, Angel, I'm just going to go ahead. So, Ms. Gaither, why don't you go ahead first, please?
Yay! Isn't technology wonderful? Oh my gosh! Thank you for doing this. I am speaking in regard to the comp plan, and excuse me. I live on Sioux Creek, where the salmon start and end, and make their way eventually past a brand new renovated fish hatchery, and eventually into Puget Sound for fishers and our orcas. I am very serious about protecting this wildlife habitat, as are you, King County, because you are buying parcels of land in Sioux Creek to protect our fish and other natural resources. And yet you are willing in the comp plan to address Pacific Raceway and put it as a total industrial site. This this horrifies me. You have property going right up to their boundary, as do I. Sioux Creek flows through all of this. Sioux Creek is on three sides of Pacific Raceway. Please do not change the zoning. Not only is this a concern for what's happening here at Pacific Raceway and my community, Sioux Creek Canyon and the salmon, Chinook salmon, but apparently this would open up setting industrial sites in rural areas throughout unincorporated King County. The process has been confusing to me, and I have worked on the comp plan in years prior, so I would please ask you to slow this down and not change the zoning and give more time for public input. And please consider your own commitment to buying open space, to preserving wildlife habitat and the quality of life. Thank you very much. Please don't change that zoning. We need more time to comment, and there are several other of your own county groups who have material yet to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I heard Julianne Bogarty. Are you still there?
Hi, yes. Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Julianne Bogarty, Bogaty, and I am a longtime resident. My family and I, and homeowner in Redmond Ridge. And I want to thank you for hearing us today, even though it's been a bit challenging with the technology for everyone to be heard in the normal manner. I know the comprehensive plan is always a big undertaking, a ton of work for you guys, and a very large responsibility as well. Our community is asking you to protect zoning in Redmond Ridge from new proposed uses that conflict with our highly populated, vulnerable residential area of kids in schools, seniors, and critically designated environmental areas. We have more kids per capita than any other neighborhood in the Lake Washington School District, according to district data, and likely in the entire county. Compared to Seattle, which has a lower percentage of kids under age 18 per capita than Redmond, in fact, the lowest nationwide apart from San Francisco, according to census data. Why endanger such a high population of kids with the unknown effects and air pollution of marijuana processing and production and other heavier industrial uses? We do not support new uses that could be permitted with high pollution concerns, such as petroleum refining, primary metal industries, industrial launderers or dry cleaning plant, asphalt or concrete plant, fossil fuel or renewable energy generation facility, wastewater treatment, landfill or transfer station, crematorium. Redmond Ridge is a place where thousands of kids live, learn, and grow in close quarters. It should not be a preferred location to target heavy industry. Please support responsible zoning and bar these new uses. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I heard Roxanne Teodorescu. I saw the last name, but we called it, I think, and I didn't hear it. Are you there, Ms. Teodorescu?
Hello?
Hello, we found you. Excellent. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate for you guys for giving us an opportunity to speak today. I'm a Redmond Ridge resident. I have been living in this community for 20 years almost. So we're all one of the most oldest. Our kids grew up here and they are now in college. I'm here in support of keeping the identical UDP, which are protecting our community rather than adding new purposes for the industrial area, like helicopter, jail, or other purposes. So this is pretty much here. I'm in support of the community. I already submitted my written statement as well. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Very good. All right. With that, I think we have exhausted the list of people as best we can, and we've heard a lot on the comprehensive plan. I appreciate everyone taking the time and bearing with us and sharing your thoughts. I know I got a lot of good notes and heard things worth following up on. I'm sure others did as well. So we appreciate you. At this point, I want to ask a question to the clerk. My notes say to close the public hearing, but my understanding was that we were going to leave the public hearing open after the comprehensive plan.
That is correct.
Okay, so as to items for action on our agenda today, we will close the public hearing, but the public hearing with regard to the comprehensive plan will remain open. And we always do receive, we will be able to receive more comments next week, as I said, and we will also always receive written comments. All right, we're going to move on now. And the next item on the agenda is we have a consent item 6 and 7, but item 6 is being removed for consent for further discussion. So I would like to move to item 7, then we'll go back to item 6. Council Member McDermott, would you move item 7, please?
Madam Chair, I move adoption of the consent agenda, item 7.
Thank you very much. It is before us. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Updegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Updegrove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer, I can see you. You're on mute.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer, if you give me a thumbs up, we'll read it as an aye.
Thank you.
Votes
Councilmember
aye.
Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai?
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair?
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
All right. By our vote, we have adopted the consent agenda, and now I'm going to go back to item number 6. And I just want to share some information that's come up since this item came out of committee. Item 6 is proposed ordinance 2020-0203. Actually, before I state this, I'm going to ask Councilmember McDermott to please put this before us.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. This is a charter amendment that was, I believe, unanimously approved in committee and came forward on consent. But between the committee meeting and now, there's been some additional information that was not perhaps stated or stated very clearly at the committee, and we want to make sure before people vote on this for final vote that it is very clear. So I'm going to just share some information that's been given to me. As members will recall, and for the benefit of the public watching us today, just a little history on this item. The former municipality of Metropolitan Seattle, if we can go back in time, known as Metro Seattle, merged into King County in the mid-1990s. At the time of the merger, the voters had approved the former Metro Seattle to perform the metropolitan functions of water, pollution abatement, and public transportation, and no others. Those are the only metropolitan functions the county assumed as the successor to Metro Seattle when those two bodies were merged. These metropolitan functions operate as distinct units in the county's wastewater treatment division and the county's Metro Transit Department, respectively. So the proposed amendment to Charter Section 230.10.10 only applies to surplus property held by the wastewater treatment division and the Metro Transit Department operating in their metropolitan function roles. This amendment would remove the charter restriction that currently prevents surplus property held by those agencies from being transferred for less than fair market value for affordable housing. As a reminder, and this was stated pretty clearly at the committee, there may be other restrictions that would still prevent a transfer at less than fair market value, such as a restriction placed on the money that was used to purchase the property in the first place. So the analysis of whether metropolitan function surplus property could be transferred at less than fair market value for affordable housing would have to be made on a parcel by parcel basis. I suspect one of the reasons that this came up was because we are currently in negotiations around surplusing a parcel owned by the Solid Waste Division in my district partially for the affordable housing. So I just think that the staff wanted to make it very, very clear that we understood what this ordinance does and does not do when we vote it today, rather than letting it go through on consent. And I will pause there because I can't answer any questions, but I believe that staff who are on the line, I see Mary Bergenon's on the line, will be able to answer questions if you have any members.
Reagan light up, but if not, I have a question.
Member Lambert, and I saw Councilmember Dunn trying to speak. We'll call on him next.
Okay. So I also had that question. Both of these are enterprise accounts, and always in the past, probably because of what you just said, we have not been able to do that. And it concerns me that if it's surplus and we sell it at full market value, then we've held the enterprise account harmless and can then spend the money however we want to inside of that account. And it concerns me that on enterprise accounts, that this may be opening the door to something that could be a problem. There's also something that concerns me, that supposing in one of these enterprise accounts, they're going to do a construction project, and they say they need 5 acres of staging. If they wanted to, they could take 10 acres, say I need 10 acres, and then be able to surplus the other 5 when really the other 5 weren't needed to begin with. Not that anybody would ever do that, but I don't know that this is written tightly enough to prohibit that. So I'm not really sure that it's worded the way that is as tight as it could be. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Dunn, were you trying to make a comment?
No, I'm not sure I was. I lost the reception there for just a second. I was just down at the courthouse and left to go into the parking garage, so I lost you for a second. I'm sorry. Can you just bring me up to speed on what it is you wanted me to speak to?
I did not want you to speak to anything, but we were providing some information on agenda item 6, just a clarification. It's one of the comprehensive plan amendment proposals. No, sorry, charter amendment proposals that would remove a specific barrier that currently exists to disposing of surplus property at less than market value under certain circumstances for affordable housing. And we were just clarifying the limits of the barrier that's being removed because other barriers still remain.
Right, I got it. I don't think I have anything to add. I just, I think if we move forward on that, it needs to be used very judiciously to make sure that it isn't benefiting anybody, that it's well thought through in terms of implementing policies appropriately that we've been pushing for a long time consistent with our plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, and item 6 is before us. Councilmember McDermott, would you to close?
I don't believe we've moved it, Madam Chair. I move adoption of most Ordinance 2020-203.
Okay, it is before us. And I called on you because my notes said to, but I believe this was sponsored by Councilmember Dembowski. So would either Councilmember Dembowski or Councilmember McDermott like to speak to it, which would be an open and a close? I'm not hearing anyone. All right, Madam Clerk, would you go ahead and call the roll on Ordinance 2020-0203?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Updegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Updegrove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer. Councilmember Von Reitbauer. Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
All right, by our vote, we have adopted proposed substitute ordinance 2020-0203. And for the record, Councilmember Von Reitbauer, we heard you. That worked. All right, moving on to item 8. Councilmember McDermott, would you move that item, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of Ordinance 2020-206.
All right, this is also an amendment to the charter. Did Councilmember McDermott or Councilmember Dembowski like to speak to this item? It was not brought forward on consent, so just for the record, this is the one that, let's see, which charter amendment is this? That grants the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight subpoena powers. All right, any questions, members? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
No.
Councilmember Lambert votes no. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Updegrove. Councilmember Updegrove. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 7 ayes. Councilmember Lambert voting no, and Councilmember Updegrove excused.
All right, by our vote, we have approved proposed substitute ordinance 2020-0206. This brings us to item 9. Councilmember McDermott.
Madam Chair, I move adoption of Ordinance 2020-209.
Thank you, Councilmember McDermott. We have Jeff Mom from our policy staff to give a brief overview. Mr. Mom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Mum, Council staff. So agenda item 9, you'll find the Office of Labor Relations staff report on page 73 for your packets. And this would approve a memorandum of agreement between the county and Protect 17 for employees who work in DCHS and public health. Yes, I am wearing a tie, Madam Chair.
It looks good.
Thank you. Thank you. These employees conduct COVID tests. So these are the nasopharyngeal culture swabs and also the serology antibody testings. And it would be a 5% premium pay for the employees who are conducting the tests in the public health clinics and then through the mobile assessment sites. There is approximately 4 employees at any time conducting these tests in the public health clinics as well as the mobile assessment sites. The fiscal impact is approximately $53,500, and the department is not requesting additional appropriation authority. The memorandum of agreement would be retroactive to March 16th and then can be terminated by the county whenever the county no longer finds it necessary to conduct these COVID tests, which I hope is soon. And that is my brief summary, and happy to answer questions. There's also folks from executive staff available.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mom. Council members, any questions? I see Councilmember Dombowski. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually a question on this, but how it relates, I think, to the next item. And if I read the agenda correctly, it might call for a similar approval of a memorandum of understanding, but with a 25% temporary pay increase. Sure. Maybe I've got that wrong, but I'm wondering if Mr. Mum could confirm that, and if so, kind of explain the reason why this would be 5 and the next would be 25. Is there some difference in duties, or what's going on?
Yeah, the difference in duty. I can explain the difference in duty, and then I would defer to executive staff on sort of the why, but it's my understanding that the difference in duties is this is just conducting tests for people who would go in. You get a test if you don't know if you're COVID positive. The other duties, the 25% increase would be for people who are providing direct patient care. So to people who are, my understanding, COVID positive and are at the recovery sites and isolation and quarantine sites. So I think there's probably, I don't know who here is.
I see Angela Marshall.
There's Angela. I'll let her fill in the why.
Ms. Marshall, welcome. Please go ahead.
Hi. The COVID care sites, so the next one we will be talking about is for staffing and premium pays for those folks who are working within the COVID care sites where essentially the patients there are all infected with COVID. The type of testing that is typically done is either stand-up sites around the county, maybe for folks coming into the courts, employees going into the jails. So typically there's a lot less contact, and of course there's less likelihood that there's exposure, and the nurses and the medical assistants are able to keep a distance for the most part from the general public on a much greater scale than those that are at the COVID care sites.
Councilmember Dombowski, did that answer your question?
I think so. And then when we get to, do you want to take questions on both now? I kind of strayed into the other one as it relates.
I feel like we're already into it, so let's. Okay. It hangs together. Let's keep going.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that explanation. And on the 25% one, is there? And I really appreciate the work that folks are doing. I visited folks on scene at the ACRC up in Shoreline, and it's very impressive, the work that they're doing. But I wonder, is there a comparable on the 25% to any other government or institution, or how that 25% came about? It's very challenging and risky work. I acknowledge that, and I just want to make sure that we're getting the number right.
I would say there wasn't a straight comparable to another location, but one of the factors that we determined was at the jails before this emergency, nurses that were working inside the jails had a 15% premium for that work. So I think that was a little bit of a guideline too. We wanted to create something that was a little bit more, but also recognizing that some people actually are working in the jails and may occasionally have a patient there that are infected with COVID. So trying to find that balance.
Gotcha. And then I finally, as it relates to our broader workforce that interfaces with the public, because we've seen requests and heard requests, which are often compelling to me for kind of hazard pay or first responder pay. Could you articulate the executive's position as to why these kind of positions would be approved for premium pay, but a transit operator or a security screener or a sheriff's deputy or a Medic 1 paramedic down in Kent would not?
Absolutely. When we were evaluating the different positions and what would make some sense to offer a premium, there were one of the main factors was the ability for an employee to maintain a distance and take all the protocols needed to reduce exposure. So whether obviously, we know that everybody has some sort of level of exposure just being out in the public, but these folks who are doing the testing or who are doing direct patient care on the body of a patient who is infected has a much greater significant risk of exposure.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? All right, hearing none. As the sponsor of this one, I will just urge your support. I think we're working through these issues, as you see from the discussion about what COVID really means to our staff. So many of our staff at King County are out there in the public providing services. These staff are actually doing COVID-related tests. And that's what they're being paid to do, and that's what they're doing all day, every day, and we know that's a high-risk activity. So I support this, and I urge your support. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, by our vote, we have adopted proposed ordinance 2020-0209. This brings us to item 10 on the agenda, and it's ordinance 2020-0212. Councilmember McDermott.
Madam Chair, I move adoption of ordinance 2020-212.
Thank you, Councilmember. The item is before us. Is there anything else to brief on this, Mr. Mumm, or would you like to just give the briefing to us?
Sure, I can do a quick briefing. So as discussed previously, this is primarily for staffing at the COVID care sites, so the assessment centers, recovery centers, and then the isolation and quarantine centers. There's sort of there's the 25% premium pay, as we just discussed, for medical assistants who are providing direct patient care. And then there's a 5% premium pay for social workers who are they're working in support of the facilities. The fiscal impact is much larger. It's $297,000. However, the council's already approved this appropriation in the third COVID supplemental appropriation that was approved 2 weeks ago. And like the other MOA, it's retroactive. This one's retroactive back to March 13th and can be terminated by the county when the COVID-related emergency is concluded. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We did cover this a little bit in relation to the last one, but are there any further questions on this item or comments since it's before us? I am not seeing or hearing any. And before we move to vote, I also am the sponsor of this item, and it is a big. It's a big premium. It's bigger than we usually do. But as was stated earlier, we are talking about people who are, for their job, working with COVID positive people on a consistent basis. It's about as risky as it can get in a pandemic, and it is very essential. We need people to do this job. And I am supportive of us making sure that they're being compensated for the extra risk that they are taking on. All right, with that, I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Upthegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Upthegrove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
By your vote, we have adopted proposed ordinance 2020-0212. Thank you, Mr. Mumm and Ms. Marshall for being here with us today. Moving on to proposed ordinance number 2019-0413. This is not on for action today, but we do have Erin Ozens of our council staff to provide a briefing on the amendments. This is regarding the comprehensive plan that we heard so much about at public comment. Ms. Ozens, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
All right. Erin Ozens, council staff. I am joined today by Jenny No, who's going to do part of the briefing. Jake, Tracy, and Andy Micklow are on the line for more detailed questions. There's quite a few exec staff on the line to answer questions, and the PAO's office, legal counsel. You were briefed on this item last on June 9th. The plan for today is just to go through what has changed in the Striker S3 from the previous version, and then to brief the individual line amendments. Striking Amendment S3 was made public by the Mobility and Environment Chair on last Thursday, the 2nd. We're going to focus on the items that are in the green folder, which for this item is an email that you received from me at 12:55. No, as the chair mentioned, no action is expected today, but after the continued public hearing on July 21st, action could be taken. Questions about that before I turn it over to Jenny to brief S3?
Any questions?
Dembowski.
Councilmember Dembowski, easy for me to say.
Thank you, Chair Balducci. Erin, thank you, and to the entire team for your work on the process. You mentioned the potential action date, but given interest in this, could you explain a little bit about whether there are any backstop deadlines? In other words, could it go longer if we needed more time for public input and refinement?
Do you see the panic on my face?
I did not.
The backstop is the GMA only allows comprehensive plan updates to be adopted once per year. So that's the ultimate backstop. Then the other considerations are the county's code calls for this update to be adopted by the end of July as written in the Striker. If it were to go beyond that, we'd need to have more conversations about how we could still comply with the code and how much further the council wanted to push it, potentially hitting into budget in September.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? How about we go on and into the Striker?
Madam Chair?
Councilmember McDermott.
Thank you. I would just note when we're having a timeline discussion, in order to advance a project in White Center that needs this action in order to proceed on target, I would be hopeful that we would be taking action at our next council meeting.
That's a good point, council member. There's also the Redmond Ridge deadline, the development agreement. One of them expires in September. So in order to have zoning in place that doesn't create massive nonconformances, this will need to be adopted before that.
All right. This Councilmember Dombowski.
Continue. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Aaron, that's some of the items I was hoping we would flesh out, because we heard requests from some folks during public comment for more time. And I can appreciate the interest in that given the limitations on our procedure here, but there are some consequences to that, including at Redmond Ridge because of the expiration of at least one of those agreements. So just by way of setup, Madam Chair, if I might, we are trying to advance revisions to this work product in the form of these striking amendments and share them with the public to get further feedback and complete further refinement. So the comments today were very helpful, and I would suggest that folks treat these as an iterative and progressive process, and that we're trying to work toward a finish line that accomplishes the goal of getting the work done, but also getting a plan that can be adopted with adequate votes. So today's briefing is the next step in that, to surface the next round of ideas. And I would suggest that perhaps all of them won't be in the final, or may appear in a modified form in the final proposal. And some folks asked, I think Mr. Johnston from Skyway, it's always a great day to be in Skyway, if he's still listening, how they relate the striking amendment to line amendments. And for those that are interested in that, I think it's worth clarifying that some members like to bring their own line amendments, even if the chair, as the coordinator of the process, might include the idea in a striking amendment. They like to have the ability to surface those for added visibility, and we try and support that where able. And then there are other amendments that deserve, additional scrutiny, and we have those as standalone as well for that reason. So the idea is to try and be as visible and transparent as possible, both in the striking amendment evolutions and getting those out for comment, having the opportunity to comment, and in the line amendments. Thank you.
Okay. That's a good lay of the land in terms of process going forward to get to the end. And now let's talk a little bit of substance. Aaron, are you done, ready to move on to Ms. No? Okay, Jenny No from Central Staff, welcome.
Good afternoon. Jenny No, Council Central Staff. I'll be briefing on Striking Amendment S3, which is page 3 of the Comprehensive Plan Green Folder PDF that Aaron previously mentioned. And the first substantive change is on the 4-to-1 program, beginning on page 3. The 4-to-1 program is one method to expand the urban growth area with the intent of creating a contiguous band of open space along the original 1994 UGA boundary. S2 included a number of changes to the 4-to-1 program regarding language to actively pursue these proposals, allowing reduced ratios for high conservation value properties, language around roads and open spaces, and then procedures around proposals that are not supported by the executive. On June 24th, GMPC made a motion to recommend that the council defer the changes to the 4-to-1 program that are related to the countywide planning policies until the 2021 update of those policies. Striking Amendment S3 would remove all changes related to the 4-to-1 program from this midpoint update, and the existing policies and regulations would remain in place. The next topic is sea level rise, climate change, and greenhouse gas mitigation, and this begins on page 7 of that green folder PDF. As part of S2, a work plan action item was added to require a forest conversion review study, and the study would provide information about the number and location of forest conversions in the county, develop options for mitigating loss sequestration capacity from forest conversions. Striking Amendment S3 modifies this work plan action item to extend the look-back period to when the county first started processing forest practice permits, adding a requirement to estimate the sequestered carbon lost by those past conversions and to make technical corrections. The next topic is the community service area sub-area planning process, beginning on page 12 of the green folder. As part of S2, the sub-area planning process was broadened from a land use only focus to topics identified in a community-driven scope of work, meaning that sub-area plans could vary by community depending on the priorities. In conjunction with the sub-area planning process, the executive would develop a community needs list that would implement the plan. In striking amendment S3, the revisions were made to clarify Title II of the King County Code in respects to the sub-area planning geography, what is in the scope of review for existing policies to be included in the sub-area plan, and then the community needs list required for the 2021-2022 biennial budget. Moving on to the bottom of page 12, relating to the Skyway West Hill land use strategy. This strategy includes 25 policies focused on commercial districts, residential neighborhoods, and community character. In S2, the strategy also included 7 action items. As part of S3 and as part of the sub-area planning restructure, the implementation chapter, which contained the 7 action items, would be removed. These action items would be captured within the comprehensive plan or within a community needs list that is currently under development. Other changes include specifying that weather protection must cover building entrances in the Skyway Business District. Lastly, there are 2 technical corrections to map amendments 8C and 8J to correct the land use designation and P suffix requirements that should have occurred when an upzone proposed by the executive was not advanced by the council. And then the last substantive change in S3 begins on page 15 and moves on to page 16. And that is related to the Bear Creek UPD and conversion of the UPD zoning and to permanent zoning. The substantive change in S3 is a correction to map amendment 7A. This map amendment designates critical areas, buffers, and golf courses to open space and wilderness. And the correction would be to rezone a non-residential tract to CB. And then I'll turn it over to Aaron for the line amendments.
I can pause for questions about the striker.
Questions about the striker? I'm not seeing any. So please go ahead and do the line amendments.
Madam Chair?
Okay.
Oh, Councilmember Up the Grove.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is about, is striker or underlying both appropriate this time? The non-line item amendment questions.
Please go ahead. I better to ask forgiveness.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Aaron, last time in the briefing when we talked about the Pacific Raceway amendments, it was just very quick. We were tight on time. And I think you said one sentence about it. Would you be willing to just walk through very clearly for me what that section does? And then in particular, in response to some of the testimony today, would you be willing to share the history of conservation, if you have that information? What's being done? What has been done in the past relating to requirements or agreements for conservation easements, and how does this impact that? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear from someone, a neutral party.
Okay. So in the green folder packet, the Pacific Raceways language is found on the PDF page 675. As proposed in S3, the land use designation and the zoning classification would be changed to industrial for most of the property that is owned by Pacific Raceways. There would still be a portion of the property at the western edge where Suzette Creek is that would be zoned and designated rural in RA5. The proposal would remove the existing P suffix, which limits the site to racetrack uses only, and would replace that with a new P suffix condition that, and the text of that is at the bottom of page 675 to the top of page 676. It would limit the uses to regional motorsports facility, which is a defined use by the code, racetrack, which is the current use, uses that are consistent with the project of statewide significance and innovative partnership zone designations that the state of Washington has put on the property, And part of that is that they are related to racetrack or automotive industry uses. The next category is, there's more.
It makes sense to me that it's allowing, if I can try to plain language just to make sure I have it here back, that instead of just racetrack uses, it is slightly broader types of industrial uses that are related to automotive industry and the center of excellence and the things enumerated.
Correct. Yes.
What about any changes relating to expectations for a conservation easement, and what does that mean, and what's been there? That's the part I'm sort of sorting through still. Had there been a requirement? Is that being taken away?
In 2001, there was a zoning change made, a permanent zoning change. As part of that map amendment, there was a non-binding sentence in that map amendment that said that the property owner had volunteered to do a conservation easement. That was never effectuated, and there was no legal consequence of that. In 2012, there was a map amendment proposed and adopted by the council as part of the 2012 comp plan. That map amendment would have swapped areas, would have made more of the property near Suzette Creek RA, and would have given Pacific Races like almost 2 acres of industrial land kind of at the northern edge of the property. Before that zoning map amendment could take effect, there was 2 pre-effective conditions. One required a conservation easement much larger than the one in 2001 and required on-site mitigation. Because that pre-effective condition has never been effective, they've never recorded the conservation easement. I think there's still some mitigation that needs to be done on site, although that's debated between permitting and the property owner. This map amendment and the underlying striker would eliminate that map amendment. And I don't want to get too far into the legal part of it, but it's not great to have outstanding, uneffectuated zoning map amendments just sitting out there in perpetuity. So there is no specific conservation easement required by this map amendment as currently written. Of course, the property owner is still required to meet the critical area requirements that are in place at the time of application. The difference then would be who manages that area. So under the conservation easement, it would be managed by the county. And under code, it probably wouldn't even be put in an easement. It would just be set aside and the property owner would still maintain it.
Interesting. Thank you. I just wanted to flag that for the chair and other interested members as an area. I know time is tight. I want to zoom down and work with you and the property owner and other advocates to understand whether or not there's some opportunity there to just memorialize what might be the expectations in one way or the other, but to make sure we're not losing, if we're seeking to advance the public interest in economic activity and the public benefit of the project, which I believe in, I don't want to sacrifice the public interest in terms of the ecological impacts. And I'm struggling to get my head around it a little bit and want to work with the chair and others to first get a little bit deeper understanding and then maybe explore ideas. So just wanted to flag that.
If I might, Madam Chair, Councilmember Upgrove, thank you for asking that question. And Ms. Ozens, that was an explanation of that complicated issue that I have come before me for years heard. So I appreciate that. And I think I align my views with Councilmember on that issue and think there's an opportunity there. I should share, I think the SEPA responsible official has issued kind of a revised SEPA document that indicates that I don't believe that we will have to be or really be able to be taking action on this item in this update. So I think there will be, and Aaron, you can spell that out for the council if you'd like, but my understanding is that the decision on this language from an environmental review means that we need more work on a time frame that's longer than we would have on the schedule we're on.
Then I don't feel rushed. That's good.
No, exactly. If I got that right, Aaron?
Maybe. That's the direction that you give me.
Well,
there's paths you can take if you want to take. there's paths you can take if you want to take action as part of this comp plan that kind of pull back some of the.
We'll take public comment into account and colleagues' views on that and see what folks want to do.
Okay.
Lambert.
Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. I have two questions. Earlier on in the testimony, they talked about that there would pretend to be 40 other parcels, that this would open up for industrial uses. Do we have a map of where those 40 parcels are?
That was in the SEPA addendum that was issued by the executive yesterday, so I would defer to them.
Okay, so since we got over 2,000 pages downloaded today, I haven't read yesterday's thing yet, so I think it would be good for us to have a little bit more briefing on that. And then my second question is on page 12, where it talks about the modified next year's major 8-year update to the 2024 as a result of the new state law changes. Offline, if you explain what the new state law changes on that. And when we do our scoping motion, how long before that do we need to have our scoping topics in for the review?
You mean for the next 8-year update?
Either 8 or 4 year.
The 8-year update, you're not actually limited to what's in the scope of work, but that scoping motion will be adopted in 2022. And then for a 4-year update, it is limited to what's in the scope of work or what is allowed as part of an annual update. And that is usually done the year before the midpoint.
Okay, so I'd also like to know why it takes a whole year before to give them the topics, because a lot can happen in a year, as this year has so clearly showed us. So we would have in 2022 to get in for 2024, what do we want to talk about going forward for the next couple of years in 2024?
Correct.
Thank you.
And I've noted down that question.
Can I jump in for a second? I thought the first question might benefit from executive staff response, and I know we have executive staff on the line. Councilmember Lambert, would it be appropriate for me to call on one of them to answer? If you could just remind us, restate the first question. It was about the 40, whether there were 40 parcels.
Yes, 40 parcels that they said would be in moving to industrial, being triggered by the racetrack. So I was just wondering where those parcels were. Were they on the however many 1,000 acres is there, or was it off-site from that?
I'm going to ask for, I've got a list of executive staff who are available.
Sure.
A number of them, I wonder if they would jump on in.
Sure. This is Ivan Miller. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Ivan Miller, Comprehensive Plan Manager with the Office of Performance, Strategy, and Budget. And in this context, also the SEPA responsible official for comprehensive planning. Councilmember Lambert, we'd be happy to share the map with you. We'll share it with Erin as well so she can distribute it if other council members would like to see it. We also have a map that shows the existing sites. We use that as context in the SEPA addendum, so we'll send both over.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
All right. Further questions? And I think we're about ready to go into the line amendments at this point. Who would like to brief us on line amendments?
I will be. I just need to get back to that page.
Okay, great.
So this is on the very first page of the green folder packet. There are 11 numbered amendments, although there's some that there's more than one. Amendment 1 from Councilmember Lambert would add a finding signaling the council's intent to add an item to the scope of work for the 2024 update. You heard about this one in public comment, and it's related to the Snoqualmie interchange area. Line Amendment 2 is from Councilmembers Colwells and Councilmember Zahalai. This would establish a requirement for businesses selling firearms to be located a minimum of 500 feet from any elementary, middle, junior high, and secondary or high school property, and establishes nonconformity for existing gun retailers. Number 3 from Councilmember Lambert would modify the accessory dwelling unit requirements to apply design standards for compatibility with surrounding development and to encourage an on-site location alternatives analysis. Map Amendment 4 from Councilmember Line Amendment number 4 from Councilmember Up the Grove would modify the proposed fossil fuel and fossil fuel facility regulations to include additional criteria and analysis in the development review of fossil fuel facilities and related uses, and would add 2 work plan items to the comprehensive plan looking at financial risk bonds for such facilities and requiring an update to the county's greenhouse gas emissions worksheet that's required with developments, and also come up with potential mitigation strategies for those development proposals. Amendment number 5 from Councilmember Balducci would modify the minimum parking ratio for cottage housing developments. The current proposal in S3 separates out the number of parking spaces by the size of the unit, and the amendment would set the ratio at 1 space per dwelling unit for all sizes of cottage housing. Amendment 6 from Councilmember Balducci would again address cottage housing, and it would establish that there is no minimum parking requirement for cottage housing sites that are within 660 feet of a transit route that runs every 15 minutes or more frequently in the peak times in the morning and afternoon. Amendment 7 would modify the subdivision and binding site plan requirements to encourage secondary emergency vehicle access as part of permit review. Amendment 8 is related to the Bear Creek UPD. It would modify a map amendment to prohibit adult entertainment businesses in the C, B, and O zones. Amendment 9A and 9B would modify map amendments to prohibit marijuana producers, processors, and retailers in the CB and I zones. Amendment 10 is competing with 8 and 9 and would modify the map amendments to prohibit marijuana businesses and adult entertainment uses within a specified buffer of other types of uses in the CB, O, and I zones. And finally, Amendment 11 would reduce the limit on marijuana retailers within the Skyway West Hill area from 4 to 2 in the entire sub area. And those are the line amendments.
Okay, thank you for going through those. Members, questions or comments? We're not taking action again today, but these are going to be coming forward at our next action, which I believe will be the July 21st, our next and final council meeting before the break.
Lambert?
Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a couple comments about the amendments. The one on ingress and egress may sound familiar to you because I've been talking about it for 4 years. I'm glad. Thank you for noticing that. Yes. We actually had a study done, which turned out to be much more in depth than I ever dreamed. I learned so much about lines of sight and road construction and road, all kinds of things. But what we ultimately came up with was that as they do a plat, that they look at how could an emergency vehicle get in. Currently, you don't have to have a second ingress or egress unless you have 100 parcels. And many of our surrounding counties have numbers much less than that. And so we tried to see what county could we be like, because if your road goes out, and at this current moment we have that situation, and let's just say it hasn't been a nightmare, but it hasn't been a dream. On the roads, we say it's been closer to a nightmare. So what we came up with that the parties seem to be fine with is to look at explaining on a plat of over 30, how would an emergency vehicle get in? So I think that that's a pretty prudent thing to do. And so if you're interested in reading the report, it's here, but I think we have watered it down to the point that it's not worth taking the time to read it. The other thing is that we are doing something that we've never done before. And the fact that we've never closed out a UPD, an urban plan development. As Aaron, our genius, wisely stated earlier, we have 3 of these at this point that we are going to be adapting from a UPD agreement to King County Code. And because it is a different animal, I just want to say we need to think of it as a different animal. And it may be the only time that we do this, because in our last comp plan, we took out, unfortunately, UPDs in the future. So as you've heard, the people very clearly saying this was an agreement, urban plan development, and the county has said that when we bring you into the county code, they would bring it in to preserve what you have. So I think being aware that this is unusual and different, and probably the last time we'll ever have the situation, we need to respect the fact that promises were made and make sure that we can keep to those promises. So just wanted to give you that background because we've never done it before, so we might need to know that that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments or questions on line amendments? Councilmember Dombowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On line amendments proposed numbers 8 and 9, which I think would address marijuana processing and production and adult entertainment in the CB and maybe industrial zones. I think, and Councilmember Lambert, correct me if I'm wrong, what I understand you may be trying to do there is to basically where those zones occur in the Redmond Ridge area, because we're transitioning from a contract agreement to try and apply our general zoning code to them. And the thing is, with our general zoning code, it has some uses that are permitted in those zones that aren't permitted under the contract, the development agreement. But so if those amendments were adopted, would those changes apply countywide? In other words, would marijuana processing or production be precluded in those zones countywide? Or is it somehow limited to just the Redmond Ridge area?
Yes, it would be in just the Redmond Ridge area so that we can comply as closely as possible. As you heard, there are some other things in there, like a heliport, that would be included that the people don't want. But I didn't know what kind of support we would get for listing all of the things that are different. As you heard the people saying, they would like a list of exactly what they have now and doing an overlay of exactly what they have now. And that would be fine with me. So I'd love feedback from other members. But what we tried to do was to pick the ones that they were most concerned about, that we would then say, okay, those are the ones that we would make sure that the agreement, which we made with them, would continue. And there's been a lot of work with the citizens. They've done an awesome job. All of them have done an awesome job. Trilogy, Redmond Ridge East, in really saying, you made us promises. Now let's keep to those promises. So that's what it would be, just in that area that we are bringing on to the county codes.
And Councilmember Dombowski, it would be done through a P6 condition that would apply to specific properties.
Okay, I didn't hear that in the staff report. I was trying to figure out how that would be, and that makes sense to me. Thank you both for the explanation.
You're welcome. There's been a lot of work done from a lot of people, and Aaron and Denny and Kevin and John. Thank you for I won't even guess how many hours. Aaron probably knows how many thousands, but lots of good hours of hard work.
I have a question on this one myself, and it may require offline follow-up, but having listened for quite a long time to residents of Skyway, for example, come and talk to us about the amount of the number of marijuana shops and things that they have in their community, and how there seems to be a real inequity in the rules. Or there's lunch going on behind me, late, and between different communities in unincorporated King County, and I find that compelling. I want to make sure that if we are providing protections from certain kinds of activities in one part of King County, that we're treating all of the unincorporated areas fairly and consistently. And so I just don't have enough background here to know how that works. And I don't want to take too much time. We've got a little bit of time between now and July 21st. I would love to find out some more, but it's striking, actually. I mean, I've been listening to folks from Skyway and folks from Redmond Ridge since well before I was on the King County Council, because as you all will recall, I used to come visit with you all in my other jobs. And it is striking how different the treatment of those two areas is. And I'm just using that as an example. And I'm having a hard time figuring out the justification for that. So also, I want to make sure, I really worry when I hear students and young kids testifying with concerns and fears about what will happen to their community, that zoning doesn't mean building, right? If we zone a place in a way that is consistent throughout our land use code, that doesn't mean that everything that's in the code will land in every zone. In fact, obviously that does not happen. But I just want to be out there as saying that I have a concern about fair treatment across communities. Councilmember Colwell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I recall, in 2016, Aaron was the staff who worked on this issue as part of the comp plan. And Aaron, if it would be all right with you, Madam Chair, if Aaron just gave us a very brief synopsis of what we did with the marijuana issues then.
Oh, I remember it clearly, but if others want to hear it, I won't stand in your way.
Councilmember Colwell's Aaron is standing in front of like an axe throwing target. I mean,
Aaron, could you just give us a brief reminder of how that all went down?
Sure. The 2016 ordinances, there were two, addressed issues both coming out of the Skyway, West Hill, and North Highland areas with density of marijuana retailer businesses, as well as the recent state law changes regarding medical marijuana. The second ordinance addressed more concerns coming out of mostly rural King County and the impacts of producers and processors around smell and other regular industrial use impacts, or not industrial, non-residential. The council made a series of changes to the regulations, adding in required buffers between the property lines of retailers, requiring setbacks of producers and processors from, residential uses, and then also required a pretty comprehensive study to be done to look at the potential for marijuana businesses in neighborhood business zones, in the urban reserve zones, and then an overall study of the industry and land use recommendations. There were recommendations that came out of that study about putting caps on the retailer in the more urban areas. I don't think the study addressed caps on processor and producer. And I think not trying to speak too much for the executive, but as they're doing their sub-area plans, they're incorporating the recommendations for that geography into the plans themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I follow up, please? Just a quick question to Aaron.
Okay.
Aaron, do you recall what the buffer zones were? The distances?
I don't.
Okay, perhaps you get that too.
I can find out.
And as Council Chair Balducci asked about whether there's consistency and fairness in the different areas. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on the line amendments that have been briefed? Sounds good. What? Is that the end of the briefing?
Yes.
Smiles and nods. Can you please just reiterate one more time the remaining steps in this process?
Sure. On July 21st, you will hold a continued public hearing. On that date, you can either take action or continue the hearing again till after the recess. But I think, as I was reminded to mention and Councilmember McDermott mentioned, there are deadlines for some of the changes that are proposed in the comp plan. So delaying it past August would create problems for some property owners. Any additional public line amendments will be issued the Friday before the Tuesday hearing. So I think it's July 17th. So if you are considering amendments, please talk to me.
Okay, and let me just harken back to our conversation of about half an hour ago. The changes with deadlines include the micro housing pilot projects or demonstration projects and the Redmond Ridge changes. Anything else?
There's a fossil fuel moratorium that expires on July 25th. So there'll be a small gap for that one, no matter when you take action. But the gap gets bigger between the moratorium and permanent changes the longer you wait.
Okay. Is there an expectation that we will sever these things and take action on the ones that are time sensitive separately? Maybe I'm speaking to Councilmember Dembowski at this point. Do you have a sense of wanting to move the entire thing on July 21st or of severing the more time sensitive items? I heard some comments about maybe Pacific Raceways amendment taking more time.
Yeah, I and where I was going with that, Councilman Balducci, is, and Aaron's, I haven't had a chance to speak with Aaron, just my staff, Garrett, when the environmental thing came out from Mr. Miller yesterday, but it seemed to me that was going to require some additional work beyond what we could get done with a full adoption. And so I want to fully understand it, but what I was signaling there was I'm not sure that will be in a final proposed striker from me because I think it's going to, that item is going to take, I think, some more work. I want to leave a little window there in case Aaron, given what she told me today, maybe there's some path there, but that's what I was going there. I mean, hopefully we could do a comprehensive update here on a timely basis, and given our limitations, we may not be able to tackle some of the more complicated or challenging issues, right?
Right.
And I guess my interest is, if possible, to get as much done as we can get done in the time that we have to get it done, right? Without breaking the body, and without trying to do too big a heavy lifts where the public feels they haven't had a chance to come along, right, and participate. So I think, there's some, for example, there were some comments on the APD issue where the 3-to-1, that notion there was, hey, it came out of the Sammamish Valley where we had an encroachment and by a municipality, and they couldn't replace it within the APD. So I thought, well, as a fallback, maybe you could remedy on a 3-to-1 in another APD. So it was trying to be supportive of APDs, but we heard some comments today where people say, well, what is that? That's concerning. So I think would be my goal to the extent there are matters that are especially sensitive or where people have concerns to based on the surfacing, to dial those back or pull those back in light of the conditions we're operating in to try and get the work done, if that makes sense.
It all does. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on from this briefing on the comprehensive plan update, the minor midstream comprehensive plan update?
Would you like to mention your potential amendment that we have advertised today?
I would, if you would remind me which one it was.
This is about the residential density incentive / TDR change.
Oh, right. So my understanding going into today was that because of the public hearing and the possibility of us taking action at the next council meeting, that it was important to put any potential changes out there for comment if they were going to be able to be offered at all. And so because I had heard the concerns that I think we all have heard about the TDR program and sort of the balance between, doing something good for affordable housing versus potentially harming the ability of the TDR program to raise the kind of money it has in the past to preserve land, that I wanted to put an amendment out into the world to potentially rebalance that. It doesn't mean I'm going to offer it. I just wanted to put it out there. And truthfully, I'm not describing it very well. I'm just saying what it is. Aaron, if you want to describe what it does with a little more detail, I would appreciate that.
Sure. The The striker includes a provision to use TDRs, to purchase TDRs for affordable housing. It beats if you are, and you get additional density if you use TDRs to do that. So between the 150% and 200% of the base density, if you construct affordable housing at a certain level, you get the TDR for 15% of its fair market value. The concept from Councilor Balducci is just to provide that extra density if you are building affordable housing at a lower level than what's in the striker, and that you don't have to use TDRs to do it. So instead of being in the TDR program, it would be in the residential density incentive program in the code.
So we will have to obviously consider the ramifications of what that would look like versus what the TDR proposal looks like versus something else, whatever else is on the table. But I just wanted to have an opportunity to try to achieve the affordable housing goal without triggering the concerns that some of the long time, very active advocates and people working in the field of conservation with the CDR program, which was, such a major innovation when it first happened. Anyway, that's out there as well. It didn't make the list because it was a lagger. So I apologize for that.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. As you bring that forward, could you add a piece to it that says that they have to analyze at the time the impact on the rural roads fees if it's in the rural area? Because when you do TDRs, you then make the rural roads fund, which is already a disaster, even worse. And so I think that we need to be aware of that and make sure that every time we do something that makes that problem worse, that we're aware of it.
Are you suggesting because it allows more development of more traffic? Is that the issue that you're raising?
No, the issue is that when you transfer property rights off of the rural area onto the urban or whatever, you then take that property and its value goes down, so it doesn't pay as much property tax. So the amount of road tax we collect continues to go down.
Well, at the risk of patting my own self on the back, my amendment does away with that problem because
I like it already then.
Well, you'll have to take a look at it because it allows more density, but it allows it without a TDR. It just allows it for the purpose of very low income affordable housing, period.
Okay, good. Thank you.
More, we should, those who are interested, I'm happy to talk about it more. Obviously, I'm not prepared today, but we'll get so before we read it. Okay. Thank you, Erin, for reminding me of that. Anyway, anything else on line amendments or anything to do with the comprehensive plan? All right, more to come.
Madam Chair?
Councilmember Dombowski, please go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I appreciate it. Just briefly, we heard a lot of good testimony. We've been receiving communications about the Skyway sub-area plan. And I was mentioned in the public comment. I'm not sure whether favorably or unfavorably, but I want to make clear that I'm very supportive of investment in and attention to completing the Skyway West Hill area plan. When I came onto the county has an adopted policy to disinvest in Skyway as an incentive, urged annexation to the city of Renton. I fought that and have advocated for significant investments in the parks there and to push. I think many of us have been frustrated with the delay, frankly, in the executive branch at completing the plan. And we have reluctantly, at their request, extended the deadlines and sometimes at the community. And I've worked with Skyway Solutions and others to support their work. So I'm excited about the renewed energy and focus on completing a community-based and community-driven plan for Skyway. Councilmember Zahala has picked that up and been a great leader on it. But I wanted to express a little bit more context there and background on kind of where I've been coming from now for a number of years on support for Skyway in West Hill.
Okay, thank you. More to come. I know the community members from various parts of the county who have a deep interest in these issues will continue following along. I want to say just one more time that the public hearing on the comprehensive plan remains open, and you can write to us as well, and we will take those comments into consideration. We received quite a few just before the meeting today as well. So, all right, thank you all. We're going to move on now to item, I believe we have a series now. Items 13, yep. Sorry.
Item 12, Matt. Yep.
Item 12, right, yeah, I lost my place. Councilmember Dembowski, would you move this item, please?
Yes, move adoption of item 12. Is this our floodplain matter?
Development regulations, yes.
Thank you. Move adoption.
All right. So I believe we have, again, Erin Ozens to provide a briefing on amendments. I also see Jake Tracy. Whoever wants to go ahead, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jake Tracy, council staff. The staff report for this item begins on page 1007 of your packet. As you'll recall, back in April of this year, I briefed the council on this proposed ordinance, which adopts FEMA's new flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps and updates floodplain development regulations for unincorporated King County in response to a FEMA audit. The updated regulations, study, and maps must be effective by August 19th, 2020 in order for the county property owners to maintain eligibility for federal flood insurance. So when I briefed you back in April, I went over the executive's proposed version of this ordinance, and I also briefed a conceptual striker at that time. The draft striker and other member proposed amendments were sent to FEMA and the Department of Ecology for review, as well as for the SEPA process. And so that striker can be found in the green folder for this item, which I sent out today at 1:23 p.m. I understand there may be some issues with downloading it, but you should be able to click it and at least view it in your browser, if not download it into Acrobat. It is a very long document because FEMA's flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps are attached, which are about 900 pages. But there's only one substantive policy change between S1 and S2 that wasn't described when I talked about that conceptual amendment back in April, so I will describe that now. I'll also note that the description of the changes from the executive version to S2 are contained in the overall meeting packet. That's on page 1013 of the packet, and so that might be a little easier for you to look at rather than going into that giant document with all the maps. So this change. When I briefed you last time, I mentioned that FEMA had indicated that King County's proposed regulations for agricultural buildings did not meet FEMA standards and needed to change. So in accordance with that mandate, the striker requires that any agricultural building in the floodplain that wants to be built below the flood protection elevation without dry flood proofing has to meet FEMA's required agricultural building variance criteria. And these are specific criteria for agricultural buildings that FEMA has they've said that we need to meet. So in existing code and in the executive's proposed ordinance, ag buildings worth less than $65,000 that want to build below the flood protection elevation go through a type 1 process, which is an administrative review with no public comment. And ag buildings worth $65,000 or more go through a type 2 process, which does have public notice and it has more stringent criteria. So this distinction between type 1 and type 2 proposals was inadvertently left out of Striker S1. And so this has been added back in Striker S2. So all ag buildings would have to meet FEMA's ag building variance criteria, and those worth $65,000 or more would have to meet FEMA's general floodplain variance criteria as well. This aligns more closely with the existing code than the language in S1, and FEMA has reviewed the language and has indicated that it meets their requirements. I'll also note on this topic of agricultural buildings that the striker contains a statement of fact that the executive is preparing an application to FEMA for a community-wide exception, and that exception would allow agricultural buildings to be built below the flood protection elevation without the need for a variance. So that's something that the executive intends to apply. I believe they're in the process of putting together an application to FEMA now, and so that is mentioned now in the ordinance. So I'll pause there for questions. There's also one line amendment and a title amendment.
Okay, any questions on the presentation thus far?
Madam Chair?
Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you. So we've had these issues in my district and have been let's just say we learned by trial and fire. So one of the things that we had is a farm pad that was built right outside somebody's bedroom window when there were other places on the property where the farm pad could have been built. Had there been any scrutiny to say, let's look at the entire 100 and some acres and see, where it would have been appropriate. Not that you have to be looking at other people's viewshed quarters, but it was probably, in my mind, not the best place because we weren't even looking at that. So it asks in our amendment to be able to at least talk about where might be good placement. So would you do two questions? Would you tell us when the $65,000 threshold was set? And also, what is the cost between a type 1 and a type 2 permit?
Thank you, Councilmember Lambert. So that language about the $65,000 threshold was set in 2008 as part of an ordinance about farm pads and floodplain regulations. So that's when that was put in there back in 2008. As for the difference between the cost, I don't know that off the top of my head, but executive staff is on the line. They might be able to give an exact number. It is more expensive for a type 2 than a type 1. But again, the same threshold would be holding of that over 65 would be type 2, under would be type 1, but executive staff can probably provide exact numbers on that.
Hello, this is Jim Chan, Division Director for Permitting. Thank you for having me on. Last name CHAN. As to the question regarding the cost difference between a Type 1 and Type 2 permit, Type 1 permits are a fixed fee, approximately around $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the type of permit. Type 2 permits are Type 2 decisions that require notice and potentially appealable, administratively appealable, and they could run several $1,000s, depending on the type of permit.
Thank you. So that's what I wanted to point out. I think as we go forward, the $65,000 should be at least adjusted for inflation. You can't build much of anything anymore for $65,000. And also, when you are a farmer, you're on a very tight budget of things that you need, and to pay even the type 1 is $1,500, just a lot of money, and in a type 2 where it could go literally into the thousands, plus it's a much longer process, makes it very difficult. So as we look at being good ambassadors of farming in our county, I think we need to look at the length of time and the amount of the threshold. So I realize that FEMA is being very prescriptive, and if we want good flood insurance, we have to go along with this. But this is very prescriptive and very expensive. So I just wanted to point that out, and I hope that we can do an amendment that would change the threshold to at least take into inflation. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions about the briefing, which is on the striking amendment? I have a kind of a broader question, if I could. You talked about, Mr. Tracy, about the executive making an application for a community-wide exemption, and I'm not as deep into this as some because I've got so little unincorporated area in my district. But it seems to me that we're experiencing more frequent and worse flooding in a lot of parts of the county. So I'm trying to figure out how it makes sense to apply for exemptions to, it seems, and maybe I'm not understanding what the exemption is, but why would we want to be more flexible about allowing people to build in places where they are more likely to become flooded?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will allow executive staff to respond to the reasoning on that.
Okay.
Hi, this is Megan Smith from Water and Land Resources Division.
Welcome, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. So I will take a first cut at that, and maybe permitting would like to add on. We know historically that a lot of our farmlands where the flat fertile soils was in floodplains. So we have a lot of existing farms in floodplains. And when they want to build outbuildings for something like storing a tractor, it can be prohibitively expensive to dry floodproof it, to tightly floodproof it. And so this provision is getting at that reality that we do have farms in floodplains. We have very tight development regulations for like new residential development in floodplains, but we do have those existing farms. So we're trying to meet that need. You had mentioned this community-wide exception we're applying for. And what we're trying to do with that is if we have that exception in place, applicants could go through just the regular permitting process without necessarily having to pursue this costly variance. So trying to give a little bit of regulatory relief and predictability to meet that need of farmers who are already in the floodplain.
Does it apply just to farms?
So this would be targeted at these accessory agricultural structures, yes.
So not residential structures?
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, let's see where we are. So this is on for action today. It has been moved. We've had
there's also an amendment.
I was going to call. Very excited about the amendment here. I wonder if either Councilmember Dombrowski or Councilmember Up the Grove would like to move the amendment, and then we can hear about it.
Sure, I'll move adoption, Madam Chair, of the striking amendment.
Thank you. It's before us. Mr. Tracy.
Okay. So striking amendment S2 is what I was just describing. There's also a line amendment, which is amendment 1. That line amendment is, as Councilmember Lambert mentioned, is in regards to farm pads. The amendment is on page 960 of your green folder packet. That's the third to last page. It basically says that there are existing criteria in the code for farm pads. And this amendment would state that if there are multiple locations on a site that meet all of the farm pad criteria, that the farm pad should be located as far as practical from the interior property lines.
Okay, Councilmember Lambert, would you like to move Amendment 1?
Certainly, I'd like to move Amendment number 1.
All right, and would you like to speak to it? I think you already have. Would you like to speak to it some more?
No, I just want to say this is based on learning the hard way, and so it doesn't require it, but it gives you the option of talking about it, so at least we don't end up in situations that nobody thought about it.
Sure. Councilmember McDermott, did you have a question? No?
Oh, Up the Grove.
Oh, Councilmember Up the Grove. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. No, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to also weigh in and support and note that FEMA had no concerns with this. And the reviewer from the State Department of Ecology said, and I quote, "It's a very good idea." And
thank you. I appreciate that.
It was very nice.
No opposition from the executive either. So I'd encourage your support.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments on Amendment 1? Okay, I'm going to call for a voice vote. All those in favor of Amendment 1, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Amendment 1 carries. This brings us back to striking Amendment S2. Any final comments on S2?
Madam Chair, I had thought that we were going to have an amendment to change the $65,000 threshold. So it isn't here, obviously. Jay, could you tell us what line the 65,000 is? And I don't know.
Yes, so it's referenced in a couple places. One is on line 469. One moment.
Would it be possible at some future point, or is this part of the comp plan where we can only talk about it for 4 years, or 2 years, for us to then have an amendment at that point that we're all aware will be coming, obviously, that would up the threshold because it's just too small?
This could be, this is not part of the comp plan or anything like that, so it could be part of a separate ordinance that comes up at any time.
Let's do that. We'll talk offline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Final comments on striking Amendment S2. All right, I'm going to call for a voice vote on Amendment S2. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Striking amendment carries. Now we are at final passage. I don't see a title amendment.
There is one actually.
Okay.
Title Amendment T1. This conforms that to the striker.
So moved.
All right. All in favor of title amendment T1, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? T1 carries. Now we're at final passage. Would anybody like to make any final remarks? Councilman Bratton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually an important measure for protecting public safety. If we do not adopt it, then county property owners will have trouble accessing the federal flood insurance program. So that's why we're doing it. It's also one of those times where we don't have as much flexibility as we would like, because in order to be eligible for this necessary flood insurance program that's important for public safety, we must adopt FEMA's flood insurance, their rate maps, and their code. And so that's what this ordinance does, is it updates it to conform with those necessary federal requirements to be eligible, as well as make some code cleanup in there. And I know that our staff and the executive staff have worked very closely with FEMA to ensure that the language meets those requirements. So sometimes there's things we have to do because the feds tell us to, and this is sort of one of those things. And there's some good things in here too that will help protect public safety as well. But that's why we're doing it, and I think it's an important step. And we have this magical deadline in our face, so I appreciate you making time today to get her done.
Of course. Just a couple of thoughts from me. I think there have been a number of things that we've done since the onset of COVID and remote operations that were not related to COVID, but almost all of the big stuff we've done has been related to COVID. It's all been about the emergency. This is government doing something that government needs to do, period, in order to keep us in line with current law and to make sure that folks in King County continue to have access to flood insurance, which is important. So it feels kind of good to do something that is a little bit more normal and routine. And I appreciate that. All right. Any further comments before I call for vote? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
By our vote, we've adopted proposed substitute ordinance 2020-0045 as amended. Next, we have hearing examiner consent agenda. Madam Clerk, would you please read items 13 through 18 into the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 13 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0092, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Courtney Foster for property on Vashon. Item 14 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0093, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Siobhan McComb and Jason Dodson for property located on Vashon. Item 15 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0095, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Petersons for property in Issaquah. Item 16 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0096, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Jonathan and Jennifer Wiseman for property in Snoqualmie. Item 17 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0097, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Len Larson and Margaret Weatherald for property on Vashon. And item 18 is proposed substitute ordinance number 2020-0098, concurring with the recommendation of the hearing examiner to approve, subject to conditions, the application for public benefit rating system assessed valuation for open space submitted by Carol Robin Lee Smith for property located at 5724 290th Avenue Southeast in Washington.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Dembowski, would you move these items, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of the hearing examiner consent agenda.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
All right. By our vote, we have adopted proposed substitute ordinances 2020-0092, 93, 95, 96, 97, and 98. And this brings us to item 19. Madam Clerk, could you please read that into the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 19 is proposed substitute motion number 2020-0183, requesting that the King County Office of Emergency Management and Public Health, Seattle and King County work collaboratively to update the King County Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan, Regional Coordination Framework, continuity of government plans, and all other relevant emergency management plans and documents to address the risks from and response to pandemics, incorporating lessons learned from the COVID-19 outbreak, and to develop a pandemic response plan for King County.
Very good. Councilmember McDermott, would you move the item, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of motion 2020-183.
All right. Mr. Tracy, are you still with us to speak to this item?
I am. You just can't get rid of me, huh?
No, please keep going.
All right. So this was voted out of the committee of the whole a couple weeks back. As the title said, this would request that the executive prepare a pandemic response plan, and then update all relevant emergency management plans with lessons learned from COVID-19. So there's a proposed striking amendment that is and title amendment today. And so basically what the striking amendment says is that it makes a couple changes that the executive requested. It removes the request that the plans include a continuity of operations plan because there's already an overarching continuity of operations plan for all hazards. So that request is removed. And it also removes the request that the plan discuss the different types of pandemics that might impact King County. And then finally, it makes some corrections to references to existing plans within the motion. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I'm going to take a moment and call on the sponsor, Councilmember Dunn, to see if he wants to say any words about the item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Tracy summarized it well, but we just, while we're still in the midst of the pandemic, this gives about nearly 18 months for the executive to study what we're doing, results learned, and create an all hazards approach to pandemic response moving forward. So the plan will be updated based on the lessons we've learned. Ms. Tracy indicated there's a striker as well as a title amendment. This has been before us for a couple weeks. I put it off to save time, but at this time I think it's appropriate to move forward. We're working very closely with the executive branch to make sure that if we happen to have another pandemic, God forbid, we'll be even better situated to handle it than the current status. So I would urge your support, and at this time move S2.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please go ahead, Mr. Tracy.
I wanted to mention that there is a mistake in both the striking amendment and the title amendment. It says that it is an amendment to version 1. This is actually an amendment to version 2. So I just wanted to make sure that when the roll is being called, that's stated that this is an amendment to version 2 because it was.
Well, let's make sure the clerk notates that error there.
Will do.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any other comments before I ask for discussion and questions? Mr. Dunn? Okay. Council members, any questions or comments on this item? Or on the striking amendment 2? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of striking amendment 2 as verbally amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, Councilmember Dunn, would you move the title amendment?
Move T1.
T2.
Councilmember Dunn, would you say title amendment T2, please, for the record?
Thank you. Move T2.
Thank you, sir. Title amendment T2 as verbally amended is before us. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Title amendment carries. This brings us to final passage. Any members have comments? I will say one thing. Just before we entered into remote operations as this pandemic came on, our staff and leadership had done quite a bit of work to update our emergency. I don't recall if it was called a pandemic plan, but it had to do with flu and infectious diseases. And then when the pandemic hit, we learned a lot right away that we hadn't thought of. I mean, there's nothing like experience, I think, to teach you what you need to know. And so I think this is very wise to strike while the iron's hot, if you will, take the experience we're having and collectively across the county, work it into our plans for the future so that we don't lose the wisdom we have gained here, because by the time something else comes along, we will have forgotten what we did and more to the point, what we did wrong and don't want to do again. So, all right. Any other comments before we move to final?
Madam Chair, just to thank you for your comments there, and I want to thank the executive branch for working so closely with me and my staff on this issue. And, as you said, we're never going to get it perfectly. There's all the planning in the world, but still this one, just came, and we're learning a lot from it. So urge support of my colleagues, and we'll make our plan even better moving forward in the future.
All right. Madam Clerk, would you please go ahead and call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Updegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Updegrove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
By our vote, we have adopted proposed substitute motion 2020-0183 as amended. This brings us to item 20. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 20 is proposed motion number 2020-0200, requesting the executive to prepare an assessment report to inform council deliberations regarding possible renewal of the Best Starts for Kids levy.
All right. Thank you very much. Councilmember McDermott, would you move this item, please?
Madam Chair, I move adoption of ordinance motion 2020-200.
All right. Thank you very much. We have Mr. Williams here to brief a striking amendment that should be available in your email. Mr. Williams, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you all can recall, this motion was voted out of the Committee of the Whole on June 30th. And as for a little bit of background, the motion asks the executive to transmit a report that assesses the effectiveness of current levy strategies and programs in meeting the goals of the levy, and that analyzes and makes recommendations on various policy considerations. The report would be due by September 30th, and I will pull up the striking amendment now. I would like to direct you to page 6 of that amendment that I sent over, which is the effect statement, which shows the following changes that would be made to the proposed motion. And I'll just start with the first bullet point there. S1 would direct the executive to solicit the feedback of the Regional Policy Committee as part of the development of the report. It would also add language to describe the levy funded goals, strategies, and programs outlined in Ordinance 18088 of those things that the executive is directed to assess. It would require the report to include an analysis of levy proceeds used to fund technical assistance and capacity building. It would require the report to include the rationale for and status of any unspent or reallocated levy proceeds. It would add language that directs the executive to explore goals and strategies that could be incorporated in an increased or expanded levy. It would add language that directs the executive to explore how a renewed levy or an increased or expanded levy would deepen the current levy's work to dismantle systems of oppression, heal continuing wounds, and realize justice for Black, Indigenous, and people of color across all strategies. It will require the analysis of investments by geographic area, including maps or data summaries reflecting available zip code data of residents, of clients, or participants served. It would add language that directs the executive to explore whether the relative allocations of levy proceeds to each goal area should be maintained or modified. And finally, it would make technical and formatting corrections to the proposed motion. And that wraps up the S1 and the changes that would take place if adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilmember McDermott, would you move amendment? Is that S1? Sorry, I don't have it all up at the same time.
Yes.
S1. Would you move amendment S1 for me, please?
Madam Chair, I move adoption of amendment S1.
Thank you very much. I want to just speak to it briefly. The last time we spoke, we had solicited input from the offices for any additions or changes to this motion, which does indeed request specific areas of study and recommendation to provide information that we will then all look to in the course of developing the successor to the First Best Starts for Kids levy, which will be up for renewal next year. So many of these changes reflect input that we received from various offices. One change was actually already received from a mayor's office that represents a SCA member on the Regional Policy Committee as requested. And then it reflects a little bit of the discussion that we had at our meeting last week. So what you see is, I think, additions and expansions on the request, not changes to what we had already talked about. And I would encourage your support of this. The sooner we get it into the hands of the staff at DCHS, the sooner they can start to compile the information that, as we heard, they've already been developing into a report that can be useful to all of us. Comments or questions before we vote on the striker? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of S1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the amendment carried. Is there a title amendment? I don't see one. I don't believe there is.
There isn't.
Okay, oh, it's a motion, right. So, okay. Any other comments before we take the roll on this motion 2020 as amended, 2020-0200? All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Dunn votes aye. Councilmember Colwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Colwell votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Upthegrove.
Aye.
Councilmember Upthegrove votes aye. Councilmember Von Wright-Bauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Wright-Bauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
By our vote, we have adopted proposed motion 2020-0200 as amended. If there's no objection, the published marked agenda, together with any changes made in today's meeting, will stand approved as the first reading and referral of ordinances and motions, items 21 through 38 as listed. And that brings us to the end of our council agenda in under 3 hours, I just want to say. And now we have a Labor Policy Committee under other business. So let's move into Labor Policy Committee.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Upthegrove.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were you going to confirm the votes?
Oh,
I inadvertently missed a vote and would love.
I would be happy to do that now. We were going to do that at the end, but I've got two actually that I'd like to confirm. On the charter amendment, oleo subpoena, we missed a vote from Councilmember Up the Grove. Madam Clerk, is that correct?
2020-206. I only have that one vote as the one that's unaccounted for.
Okay.
My intent was to vote yes.
Okay, I will change that to 8 ayes and Councilmember Lampert voting no.
Okay. I did want to just ask Madam Clerk if it made a difference that at the beginning when we had the audio challenge, if we should have Councilmember Von Reichbauer record his verbal vote to 2020-0204.
That's a good idea.
Councilmember Von Reichbauer, why don't you call on him? Sorry, that's not my job.
Councilmember Von Reichbauer, how would you vote on 2020-02? Thank you. That vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
Excellent. So now our record is 100% voting. Very good. Thank you all. All right. Labor Policy Committee item number 40. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 40 is Labor Policy number LP 2020-002, Labor Policy relating to civilian oversight of the Sheriff's Office.
All right. Councilmember Domowski, would you move the item, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Move adoption of the labor policy.
Right. I think we're doing this a little bit backwards, but we have Mr. Mumm to provide a brief overview. I don't think there's any harm in the motion going first, so let's just do it. Mr. Mumm, are you with us?
Madam Chair, I believe Mr. Curry is going to take this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Madam Chair, it's Clifton Curry of Council Staff. Mute now. Okay. Can you hear me? Very good. This labor policy would update your current labor policy, which was last changed in 2007. And here, there we go. I finally got my materials up. Sorry about that. 2017, the council's labor policy committee adopted a policy which required that the county's bargaining agent, which would be the executive and the sheriff's office, to negotiate in good faith with the King County Police Officers Guild to prioritize achieving the authorities granted to the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight, or OLEO, under charter and code. That was followed in 2019 when 5 members of the council sent a letter, which is an attachment to this labor policy, to the county's labor negotiators, stressing that the policy adopted in the council's labor policy should be fully achieved. In March 2020, the council considered and adopted Ordinance 19084, which adopted the collective bargaining agreement for the Sheriff's Guild. While it had many of the requirements set forth in the labor policy included in the bargaining agreement, not all of the elements were included, especially the provision that would implement code requirement allowing for OLEO to issue subpoenas. In addition, despite the various other requirements, county code, and provisions of the labor policy, the collective bargaining agreement precluded independent investigations of representative employees by anyone other than the sheriff's office, therefore OLEO not being able to investigate. With this particular labor policy with you today, the executive would be directed to request that the King County Police Officers Guild reopen negotiations of the existing collective bargaining agreement between the parties. And if the Guild consents to reopen negotiations, the county and the bargaining unit should engage in discussions to amend the CBA to allow for subpoenas and to allow for investigations of all employees of the sheriff's office. Furthermore, the policy, if adopted, would require that within 30 days, the bargaining agent or the executive shall transmit to the clerk of the council basically a report describing what efforts the executive has taken to effectuate the policy. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm available for questions.
Madam Chair.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I was wondering why people weren't responding. I was going to call on Councilmember Dembowski, the sponsor, to see if he wanted to say a few words before I ask for questions.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We've just celebrated Independence Day, I think the 244th Independence Day of America. The foundational document there was the Declaration of Independence, which reminded us of a fundamental principle, and that is government rests upon the codes that are being governed. Public safety and law enforcement are of core duty of government. And how that is done, I believe, rests fundamentally with the consent of the people. In King County, the people in the last decade have twice amended our Constitution, the Charter, to establish the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight as a key component of our law enforcement system. And that key component is to have an independent, separate from the Sheriff's Office entity to take a look at problems when they arise in the department. We wrote and adopted an implementing ordinance for the last charter amendments that strengthened the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight. And we had a real discussion and debate about how strong that should be. Should it include subpoena power? Should it include the authority to conduct independent investigations? On both of those questions, carrying out the will of the voters, this council said yes. Now, it's not that easy, like a lot of things in government. And that is, in this case, because there is a hurdle to direct implementation of that, and that is the power of the guild represents the sheriff's deputies, as well as the sergeants. They have their own union. They have to negotiate that under our current state law. We did request that those items be included in the current contract. They were not able to achieve those. I will say that there is some nod to the independent investigative authority and that they were going to look at other jurisdictions. We, in the midst of the pandemic, adopted the contracts to Curry noted. I raised at that time this concern and disappointment that these issues were not included in the contract. And then George Floyd was killed, and it has been reported that the subsequent civil rights and police reform largest in American history, mobilizing more people around the country and frankly around the world than any other cause in our history. And so I believe, returning to the consent of the governed, who I believe want to see and have voted again and again to see these powers and this structure be strong and be effective, that we owe it to our citizens, our residents of the county, to go back to the bargaining table one more time in light of these changed circumstances, in light of this renewed interest, this strong demand, that we have this independent oversight office effective with respect to independent investigations and the ability to carry them out effectively with subpoena power, and see if the guild wants to take another look and maybe in light of what's occurred, reflect and say, maybe there's a way that we can do this and it should be done. It's an expedited process. They certainly have the right to say no. They can. The contract has an integration clause in it. It says very clearly that's had the opportunity to bring all issues forward. And so this is an opportunity to go to the table and see if anything has changed. And if they say, yeah, let's talk, well, that would be great. There might be some movement in the direction there that both sides could agree on issues. If they say no, then we know. We've tried, and we can look at other approaches. The county executive, in his remarks to the Law Justice Committee special meeting a couple weeks ago, mentioned one approach, and that is to go to Olympia and take this issue off of the bargaining table. And I think we would know whether or not that needs to, whether there's merit in that based on this. We have our budget coming up. We could, account for that in the budget. But this is a good faith effort to go forth with one more try and try and be responsive to those who sent us here to govern on their behalf, to carry out what they've twice asked us to do in good faith. So I encourage members to give it fair consideration and hopefully we adopt it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Domowski. Any further discussion? Councilmember Updegrove.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Councilmember Domowski for bringing this forward. It's a frustration I've heard from constituents for some time, and as he noted, that public expectation has been affirmed by an overwhelmingly powerful vote of King County voters in terms of putting this into our charter, and has been affirmed by the incredibly powerful movement of citizens speaking up. You all know where Normandy Park is, a sleepy, mostly white little community. We had over 1,000 people pour out into the street in the city of Normandy Park asking for more accountability. If we're going to be responsive to our constituents, then we need to use all the tools at our disposal. And this is a tool that respects labor and respects that collective bargaining process by going through the motions of amending labor policy and requesting that they reopen it. That's a respectful thing to do. Obviously, there's a lot of debate right now as to whether or not civilian oversight of law enforcement, those who have the ability in a democracy to use the police power, the authority to kill people, whether or not that aspect of the job should be subject to collective bargaining. I think in Olympia, that's something that needs to be taken up. And also, sometimes there's a sense that, this is someone else's problem. The city of Seattle has the problem. But we were seeing very clearly this week that we have a culture problem in the King County Sheriff's Office. We saw a 40-year employee post racist, derogatory, hurtful statements in public. This is an employee who should not be working for King County and ought to be terminated. Yet the response at the top was tepid. And these are the kind of situations where having more aggressive, independent civilian oversight would allow us to ensure that the expectations of our constituents are embodied in the work we're doing. So the way you framed it, Councilmember Domowski, is perfect. This is about the people of the county having a say in their government, and one of the most fundamental responsibilities that we have as a government, which is public safety and police powers. And the Guild may say no, but there's no harm in asking. And we ought to be doing everything in our power to utilize the tools in a respectful manner to deliver on the accountability our constituents represent. So thank you for bringing it forward, and I hope we are able to pass it.
Further comments? I'll say a word before we move to close. And first of all, Madam Clerk, I would like to add my name to the co-sponsors list. There's 4 prime sponsor and 3 co-sponsors at this point, and I think it sends a strong message to have those of us who are in support of this actually listed on it.
I will make sure your name is on there.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I support the concept behind this. I do think that the urgency, the need has probably not changed much, but the urgency has changed quite a bit. And I think that it shows in the fact that at pretty much every council meeting we have this summer, we are taking up some aspect of moving forward with additional accountability and oversight. And I think we also know that, policing and criminal justice is not the only aspect of our work that needs addressing, but that's why I was really pleased to expand the thinking in the Best Starts for Kids levy study that we just passed earlier to talk about ways that we can start to use those really forward-looking funds and programs that we have to expand that and deepen our investments in the areas that we need to, so we get beyond just talking about law enforcement. I know that's not what you all, my colleagues, have been doing, but I think that that's sometimes the beginning and end of the discussion, and it should not be. But this is a very important step. I add my voice to my colleagues to encourage our labor partners in the King County Police Officers Guild to be willing to come to the table and have these discussions. I think it's in the interest of police and the justice system as well to have these discussions. The main challenge that I think we have right now is that there is such a break between law enforcement and the community we're meant to serve. The function is important, but there's such a breakdown of trust, such a breakdown of the expectation of fair treatment and And this is one way to start to build. And I really want to encourage our partners to join us in doing that. Now I will support the motion. Anyone else? Councilmember Dembowski, anything to close? You're muted this time. It's catching.
I've been so good. I wanted to express my appreciation to you, my colleagues, for the thoughtful approach that we take on these issues, for the hard work that we're undertaking under the leadership of Councilmember Zahalai on the Law Justice Committee. And I want to say it's a privilege to be a part of this body that takes this work seriously and with real purpose. And I know that we're going to do the very best we can, and this is just one piece of a lot of actions and steps that we are working on. And I'm hopeful that perhaps it will yield some change. And if not, we'll have more information about other strategies to pursue if necessary. But I want to say this as well. Councilmember Up the Grove raised the incident over the weekend. One of the victims, the young person who died, was the child of a law school classmate, a friend of mine. And that death hit particularly close to home as a result. I had shared that with you, Councilmember Balducci. And it was extremely hurtful to see the remarks from one of our own employees about that. This motion isn't about that, but I do think it's indicative, as Councilmember Up the Grove pointed out, and I think I've seen Councilmember Zahalai remarks that say we have some real deep fundamental work to do together to change our criminal law enforcement system to one that is less punitive, more restorative, more safe, more respectful, and of, by, and for the community. And I hope that this little piece of it could help go along in that way. Our OLEO office is not about getting somebody. It's about instilling confidence and trust and transparency and accountability. And nobody should be against those things. We can do it with due process and with procedural protections. But without it, I don't believe without an effective office there that has the ability to do the job that the citizens and residents of the county have asked to do, I don't think we can accomplish those things that we want to accomplish. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a few personal words on this item. Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dembowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Dembowski votes aye. Councilmember Dunn. Councilmember Cole-Wells.
Aye.
Councilmember Cole-Wells votes aye. Councilmember Lambert.
Aye.
Councilmember Lambert votes aye. Councilmember McDermott.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott votes aye. Councilmember Up the Grove.
Aye.
Councilmember Up the Grove votes aye. Councilmember Von Reitbauer.
Aye.
Councilmember Von Reitbauer votes aye. Councilmember Zahalai.
Aye.
Councilmember Zahalai votes aye. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 8 ayes, and Councilmember Dunn is excused.
All right. By our vote, let me get onto the right set of notes here. By our vote, we have adopted proposed labor policy LP 2020-002. I want to one more time just see if we can collect that final missing vote, which we tried to do earlier, but we had one, and I really want to try to collect all the votes. Do you see if Councilmember Dunn is on the line?
I don't see him offline.
Okay. All right. With that, the vote will stand. And we have reached the end of this meeting. Before we adjourn, I want to remind people that we do have an Employment and Administration Committee starting after this meeting. Colleagues, would you like to start right away, or shall we take a 15-minute break and start at 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock.
Okay. Please sign back into, where are we signing into, Melanie, when we're done with this?
You can stay in this call. You can adjourn this meeting and then just stay in this call and come back at 5.
This meeting, and at 5 o'clock we will be in this same call for our Employment and Administration Committee meeting, and the council meeting will now be adjourned.
Perfect.
All right.